Hey everyone, this is Alan Schimmel and you're watching TechStrong TV. Today's Tuesday, October 27th. Welcome. Hope you're safe and well watching this wherever you are. We've got a great TechStrong TV for you today. If you missed it, last week was our DevOps experience. I think it was the 22nd, last Thursday. It's available on demand still. We've got, I don't know, I think there were 40 or 50 sessions in total. Go check them out. You can see which ones you like and check them out. We do have one we're going to play today, and over the next few weeks we'll probably play a lot of the sessions here on TechStrong TV for you. But do check that out. I should also mention we have a great IBM Cloud and DevOps show coming up later this week, with also, I think, just a smaller show, just maybe 4 hours. I think we have about 8 or 9 great speakers and sessions for that. And we are closing out our call for speakers for Low Code Today, which is coming November 19th. So if you go to lowcodetoday.com, you can get information. If you're interested in speaking, presenting, or sponsoring, information is at the site. Let me tell you a little bit about what we have in store for you today, though. First of all, I'm happy to be joined by my friend Charles Kalaji. Charles has recently joined the Accelerated Strategies Group as a security analyst, and Charles's first report was sponsored by ASG Technologies, not Accelerated Strategies Group. And he's going to tell us all about that. After Charles, I'm joined by my friend Brendan O'Leary over at Developer Advocate at GitLab. And Brendan's going to talk to us about some new integrations between GitLab and some of the new HashiCorp applications that were announced recently at HashiConf. There's some good stuff there in the CI/CD space, as I think we're seeing a maturation in the CI/CD space. Because of Kubernetes, because of more, we're starting to see orchestration now in CI/CD. So interesting, good conversation there with Brendan. After that, I do have something I wanted to show you out of our DevOps experience event from last week. And this is going to be the first one. It's the importance of a diverse workforce, and it's by Women in DevOps, Lauren Langdell and Antonia Otter, and they're going to talk about the importance of a diverse workforce in DevOps as well as elsewhere in IT. And then after that, we're going to have our bi-weekly segment of CISO Talk. And in this CISO Talk, Matt Newfield, CISO of Unisys, my co-host, joins me and Mitchell Ashley of ASG, along with Julian Watts, General Manager of the Security Practice at Devo, and Ben Carr, CISO at Qualys. And we had a great discussion on what is the responsibility of CISOs vis-a-vis data breaches, alerting, disclosure, to the board, to executive team, etc., and what can CISOs do to kind of stay out of trouble. It was an interesting discussion by 4 or 5 experienced security folks. So welcome to that. I think you're going to enjoy it. After CISO Talk, Charlene O'Hanlon, our Chief Content Officer and Managing Editor at Media Ops, will be giving us today's news headlines around the Media Ops community sites. And then Charlene has an interview with Prince Cohiel, Automation Anywhere, security best practices for robotic process automation, RPA deployments, reducing risk of exposure. Charlene will also give us a webinar preview of some of the great webinars we have on store today. One I want to call out to you is on Friday, October 30th. It's a live webinar roundtable as part of DevOps Unbound. And we're going to be talking about the ghosts, ghouls, and goblins of DevOps. And I will be on hosting as the hippy-dippy DevOps dude. I haven't taken on that character in about a year, so I'm looking forward to it. And I'll be in costume. So that's on Friday. Do check that out. After that, I'll be back to introduce Mitch over at the Analyst Corner. Mitchell has some great commentary and video for us. And then we've got a double dose of Mike Vizard's Channel Roundup. Mike is going to interview Arctic Wolf, which just announced a huge raise and unicorn type of valuation. And then also Mike's going to talk to CEO Richard Lee of Ambassador Labs about API gateways and so forth. So 2 great Mike interviews. And then I'll be back to wrap things up. Man, it sounds like a great Tuesday. I hope you'll hang out and enjoy it with us. We're going to take a break right now for a quick commercial, and we'll be right back with our first guest, Charles Kolodji. So, for those who don't know, Charles Kolodji has been an analyst in the security world for probably 15, 20 years. In many ways, he just looks like a security analyst. He talks like a security analyst, he acts like one, and he writes like one. Charles is the consummate professional. We're real happy to have him part of the ASG team here, Accelerated Strategies Group. Charles' first report came out just recently, was sponsored by ASG Technologies, different than our Accelerated Strategies Group. And here's my interview now with Charles about the report.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel, and you're watching another segment here on TechStrong TV. In this segment, I'm really happy to be joined by I was going to say an old friend, but it's not that he's old. It's just I know him a very long time from the security world, my friend Charles Kolodji. Charles, how are you?
Hi, Alan. I'm great. It's good to see you again and talk to you on this forum because I've been watching and really happy to be on.
I'm happy to have you on. And of course, I see you have your Fenway Park Boston view behind you. Looks like it would be a nice spring or summer day with that blue sky, and it's good to see. It's good to see. We were just talking baseball a little bit before we got started. Anyway, Charles, for our audience who maybe are not familiar with your background, why don't you give us a little bit of your own story, and then we'll jump into stuff.
All right, it's great, Alan. And I kind of am old, so I've been in the security business for 30
you
plus
and me both,
years.
my friend. Yep.
30 plus years. I started with the National Security Agency before there was anything such as cyber. We were all computer security and communication security and information security. Yep. And so I cut my teeth in that and learned a lot and moved on eventually to be a market analyst at IDC, and then went to the private industry for a short while to try that out. And I'm back as an analyst now and enjoying myself and working with you guys through Accelerated Strategies.
Absolutely. So Charles is our resident cyber expert at Accelerated Strategies Group. And Charles, you were at IDC, though, what, about 15 years, I bet, right?
Yeah, 15 years. I did a lot there. And, I still like my claim to fame is I defined the unified threat management market, which is still going strong. So
UTM sure is. I do remember when that became a thing. It's funny, Mitchell and I at Still Secure, we were trying to do something called Cobia, which was sort of a UTM with open source router built into it. And well, whatever. In retrospect, I guess I'm kind of glad we didn't. Who knows? But anyway, yes, UTM is quite a category. Charles, you recently, I think, completed your first kind of report at ASG. Why don't you give our audience a little background?
Yeah, so we did a survey to try to figure out what the data protection for Kubernetes is looking like, what people are doing to develop it. And what problems they're having, what concerns that they're looking at, because it's relatively new. I mean, we're doing a lot of cloud, we're doing a lot of containerization, and Kubernetes is needed to orchestrate that and to manage those containers. So the question becomes, what kind of security they're using, if any, and then how can we improve it? Or based on the outcome of the research, is there a way to advance that security capability through with the Kubernetes and for containerization, really?
Yep. And I should mention that this research was sponsored, though not necessarily at their direction, but it was sponsored by, is it Zetaset?
Zetaset, yes.
Yep.
They are they commission this research, but like with most analyst activities, they commission it. They want to know themselves and be able to present that, but this is analyst work, so it's I
your
love
work,
doing
not
this
theirs.
sort of thing.
Yep, good stuff. So, Charles, share with our audience, what do you think some of the big highlights here, or the top 3 things, let's say, that people should take notice of?
Well, one of the things is that this is real. I mean, people are using Kubernetes for their containers, and they're using it in production. They're using multiple applications in that space. So, people are really, that this is being used. So that's the first thing, I think, is that component. The second thing is, they are using, they are taking security into consideration. They are using what they have available to them, which could leave some things open. And the last thing, I think the real takeaway is, we had a question about, what's your greatest vulnerability? What do you think is the greatest attack surface for Kubernetes environments? And we had a number of multiple choices, such as, is it the container vulnerabilities, or is it network management? Is it access control? Is it the platform capability, or just the core platform vulnerabilities? So those were the choices. Well, we also had a choice of all attack surfaces are vulnerable, and nearly 50% of the people came and said, all the attack surfaces.
Services are vulnerable.
Yeah, so that kind of tells us that, wow, there's a lot of space that needs to be covered, and not one solution is going to do this. People are going to have to start, making a strategy, I think, for security for their.
You think we'll need a layered defense?
Yeah, I guess we have to say that. Yeah.
Yeah, so we've always said that, and it's true today as it was 20, 30 years ago. But, Charles, an interesting thing. Last week I was invited. I don't know if you've been invited to any of these yet. The vendors do a virtual wine and cheese event to introduce their new product, their new book, their new white paper, their new something. And they send you usually nice wine and good cheese via FedEx. And you zoom in at the appropriate time, and you're joined. It's an intimate, maybe 12 people, 3 or 4 from the vendor, 8, analysts, media folks, customers, whoever. And they tell you a little bit about the wine and cheese that you're eating and drinking, and then, they give you their spiel. And then they usually reserve a half hour, maybe 40 minutes for people to talk. And I was at one last week, and a gentleman came on, and he's been a fellow, you may know him as well as I. He's been around a while, more than a while. And, and he said something to the effect of, we hear a lot of noise about all this DevOps stuff. And now, of course, the rage is Kubernetes. But, in my discussions with Fortune 1000s, Global 2000s, I'm not really seeing the pickup or the adoption of DevOps and Kubernetes and cloud native and so forth. We are seeing Agile catching on. And I'm sitting and listening to him, Charles, and I'm saying, I don't know. Do I live in a bizarro world? Am I in that much of a bubble where, God darn it, Agile's 20-something years old. You're just seeing it catching on now, right? And DevOps has been around 8 to 10 years. It's probably been one of the biggest initiatives on most organizations' plates. And I just saw another survey that said 70 or 75% of the new applications, so these are greenfield, new applications being done on AWS or Kubernetes based. And you're questioning whether or not it's real? In 5 years, it's gone from 0 to 100, and you're questioning whether or not it's real. What's it going to take to be real?
Yeah, I find that very interesting that he would make that because, one of the great things of being an analyst is you get these questions that and then you go and research them. So I spent a lot of research time understanding Kubernetes much greater so that, the survey would have more power and the write-up. Mm-hmm. And, I found a lot of use and just like you said, all new developments are coming into containers and using Kubernetes.
Yeah, it's dominant.
So how can you not be seeing that? The explosion of cloud, especially during this COVID time, has just been amazing. And so I would have to,
I think
putting my hat on.
Yeah,
I'd have to say that maybe that company or that person isn't involved in this area and trying to downplay it. I mean, that's what my idea would be. But there is, I guess, if I want to get back to the survey for just a minute, there was a very interesting question we asked about, is the DevOps team working with the security team and how that relationship's working? And, half of the companies are using security closely integrated with the DevOps to get this working. So that's a promising area because, as you mentioned, the having security and just DevOps in general working together has not always been an area of interaction. It's been growing, and that's been something I've been following for 15, 20 years myself. But what was most interesting is, they are using the security teams, but half the security teams that are being integrated don't have that skills, do not have the skills to do security for containers and Kubernetes and the policies and issues associated with how you secure this sort of environment is still lacking. So that's the other thing. We have the skills gap in general, but as people advance their technologies and move to the cloud and do these areas, we need to, vastly improve the security education. Now that said, the good thing is that security, the principles of security are the same. So really, you just need to educate them on the technology because then they can address that. Okay, I know what confidentiality is. I know what access control is. So just tell me about Kubernetes, and I can help you with the security aspects of that. So that's where I think we are.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you there. I think to a certain extent, security. What I find interesting, Charles, is I remember when cloud burst on the scene. I guess around 2004, 2005, right? And then going to an RSA conference, and all of a sudden everything was about cloud security, right? And we saw the rise of the Cloud Security Alliance and all of these things. And what was interesting then, there's parallels to now, right? First, we went through what my friend Rich Mogul, Rich, called cloud washing, right? Where they took kind of their normal security tools and just stuck them in the cloud and said, oh, now they're cloud security. I think we've seen that with Kubernetes. They've taken pre-Kubernetes kind of security tools, stuck them into the Kubernetes stack, and said, okay, now they're Kubernetes security. Then I think the other thing is again, that defense in depth is layers of security. You're securing different parts of the stack, data, what have you. I think initially, much like when we started with cloud and hypervisor, the first thing they started was scanning for vulnerabilities. So we'd scan for vulnerabilities of the data inside the container, and now we also scan for vulnerabilities on the container configurations. And that's, let's call that phase one of container security. Then we started moving beyond that into other phases: access control of the containers, management of the containers, data security of the containers, encryption, just like, paralleling what we see in the real world. They're all real, but paralleling what we see in the broader world of security, and there'll be layers of security controls, layers of security tools, processes, policies, and each one is going to demand that security pros learn, right? Become familiar with what the unique challenges of what we see there, in a Kubernetes environment. But here's the other thing that I think we haven't dealt with before, Charles, and that is it's not just the security pros who have to deal with this, right? Increasingly, when we talk about Kubernetes security, developers are involved, the ops folks are involved, and we need tools that are geared to them as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's very true. And as we think about, DevSecOps and needing to, integrate that. And again, that's something I've been looking at with software security from day one when we were doing web, right? So you started off with websites were built without security in mind. And the developers had to learn that, and they're still learning that. They're still that OWASP top 10 and things. So, it will take time, I think. But the issue here, the great advantage, I think, is that, with Kubernetes and containerization, the organizations understand that the DevOps needs to have that security aspect. And that's why, again, for this environment, and to have half of the teams reaching out and having integrated with their security or having security involved in this is a step forward. I think that's going, it's going to help. The issue is, of course, as you said, we're like other things, we're layering on existing security that isn't always, we're trying to put that round peg into a square hole right now, and we need to do better at making Kubernetes security that square peg to go in there. And there is improvement. The survey said that half of the people said that data security can be improved, and half of the people said that it's okay right now. So there's, in that mind, I always look at it from, wow, that's not enough, right? Half of the people saying that needs to be improved is definitely not enough. So I think, this is definitely an area that is going to grow, going to be active, and we're going to move forward with.
Fair enough. I agree with you. Charles, where can people get more information on the report? Where can they get the report?
Well, Zetaset will have it, I'm sure, and Accelerated Strategies will have it on a group. Will have it on their website. And I suspect I will be writing a blog, then putting it on Security Boulevard. And so take a look on that, and that will give people a good idea of where we're going, and that will be another avenue to pick it up.
Does my heart good. All right. Hey, Charles, first of all, it's a pleasure to have you here on TechStrong TV with us. It's a pleasure to have you as part of Accelerated Strategies Group. It brings some real world experience and a touch of class to the operation. So thank you so much for that. And best of luck. We'll check out this report, and we'll be looking forward to more research coming from you to our audience. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Alan. And I hope to be on here again relatively soon.
You have an open invitation. All right. Charles Kalagi, analyst with the Accelerated Strategies Group, on a new report on container security, sponsored by our friends at Zetaset. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We're going to be right back with our next guest.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Our next guest is my friend Brendan O'Leary, developer advocate at GitLab. Brendan and I talked about the recent HashiConf from HashiCorp event, where HashiCorp previewed 2 or maybe more new applications as part of the HashiCorp family. And, we're going to talk to Brendan about how GitLab integrates with them, how important we think they are going forward, as well as what we're seeing is a continuing evolution in the CI/CD space. So I think we don't want to miss that, and we'll check that out. So now, here is Brendan O'Leary.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome to another segment on TechStrong TV. For this segment, I'm joined by my friend Brendan O'Leary, senior developer evangelist and kind of cloud native specialist from GitLab. Brendan, welcome.
Alan, thanks for having me. It's always great to see you and chat.
Yes, it is. Actually, you haven't been on a lot lately, Brendan. You used to be a regular, and you disappeared on us there for a while.
Well, we've all had our ups and downs this year, but no, I'm always happy to take the time to talk with you, Alan. So thanks for having me.
Great. It's good to have you on, my friend. So, Brendan, the news this week is around an integration with GitLab and some HashiCorp products, yeah?
Yeah. So, HashiCorp had their conference, HashiCon, this week. And we were excited to, hear about 2 new products that they came out with. We have a close relationship with those over at HashiCorp. Admire their work, and really excited about Waypoint, which is a tool for kind of building, deploying, and releasing code that kind of brings Terraform. They're one of their most popular open source tools, and that kind of declarative structure to building, releasing, and deploying software, which, as we all know, is a big challenge. And we're excited to announce the integration with Waypoint, where GitLab CI/CD becomes the kind of orchestration layer that runs Waypoint for you. So it's pretty exciting.
That is very exciting. It's funny, Brendan, and you wouldn't know this because we haven't spoken, but I've been seeing a lot of buzz, a lot of news, a lot of work being done on. I don't want to use the term next-gen DevOps because that's so cliched, but on a next-gen DevOps, right? On a new kind of generation of DevOps tools and mindset. If we look at DevOps, and Brendan, of course, I'm doing DevOps.com 8 years now, right? Mm-hmm. Jenkins, 7 years ago. Jenkins was the CI tool of choice. And as we started moving into CI/CD, I think Jenkins remained a standard. We saw other players. Of course, we saw GitLab come on the scene 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, right? And others, right? We've seen Zibia, which is now digital. We've seen a lot of companies, but they all kind of followed that traditional, if you want to call it CI/CD type of pipeline. Okay. Now I'm starting to see a new gen of tools optimized in many cases to work like in a Kubernetes or cloud native environment. And instead of that traditional pipeline, they're software release tools that work with orchestrators. I'm seeing, you just mentioned using GitLab as an orchestration tool for this point. I've seen some new companies come out of stealth with some fundraising, calling themselves out as orchestration tools for the CI/CD, pipeline, working in a GitOps kind of world and so forth. So I think with the rise of GitOps, we're seeing this orchestration of release tools, and of course, we think of Kubernetes as an orchestration tool, though not for release, right? For managing your containerized infrastructure. So I'm wondering, is this going to become the new norm?
I think so.
Software release.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the reason we're seeing it is, as kind of all companies have become software companies and then start to mature along that journey, we're seeing this like imperative to be able to deliver better software faster, right? That's the driver behind this concept of cloud native architectures, driver behind a microservice architecture. And those architectures are much different, right? They're kind of a step change in how we look at deploying an application, even how we define what is an application, right? And so I think that you want a set of tools that kind of natively support that. And again, some of these technologies have been around a long time, and they're great for that previous kind of generation of that monolithic world of deploying to virtual machines. But as you want to increase that efficiency in both your software development process, right? That might be a reason you look at something like microservices or going more cloud native and leveraging all of the great things that cloud providers can do for you. At the same time, you then need to change those tools to kind of match, that kind of more modern way of thinking. And I don't mean it to be disparaging in either direction. It's just like we're changing how we think about these things, and that just necessitates a different tool set, I think.
I agree with you. Here's another trend, Brendan, that I'm picking up in parallel of closely related to this. You mentioned doing, more faster, better. I think previously we measured that by how many deploys a day you do or how many deploys you do, whether it's a day, a week, a month. I see some of the more advanced companies and organizations moving away from measuring speed by speed does not equate to deploys, right? We look at speed and quality, business impact, more importantly than I did 10 deploys today versus 20 yesterday, right? And so when we look at speed, it doesn't equate to how many deploys I did.
Exactly. Yeah, I think in these businesses that hadn't been software businesses and now are, right, and retail or transportation or name your industry, it's really critical for them to understand the impact of these changes, right? They're used to a lot of signal about, if I put this product on an end cap, what's the difference in, the pickup, or I put it at eye level, right? These are kinds of things that, a retailer, for instance, is used to signal about how to, optimize their business and deliver the best value to customers. They desperately want and need that same signal from the software products they're delivering. And so I think the more that a tool can look at the entire DevOps lifecycle, not just how fast are we deploying. I mean, that's great, but you also have to be concerned about the value you're delivering. And that value comes in the form of, like you said, the impact of the business. How can we measure that impact of the business? That value comes in the form of what is the experience I'm giving to my users? That value comes in the form of, am I delivering secure software, right, that my users can trust? So all of those things are wrapped up in this value proposition. And that's, I think where we've seen a lot of focus from companies like HashiCorp and GitLab that want to optimize for not just, lots of deploys a day. I mean, that's, I think, maybe table stakes if you want to be able to do some of those other things, but actually understanding what impact do those deploys have on the business and our ability to move faster than our competition.
Agreed. All right. So we were way up here. We got all strategic on you about. Let's get tactical about this integration now. So, does Waypoint run within GitLab, or is it separate but somehow?
I mean,
Yeah, so-
what are the mechanics there?
Yeah, so at its core, Waypoint is this, CLI tool that allows you to define your build, deploy, and release process as, a simple HCL declarative syntax, right? And then run, a simple like waypoint up. The best analogy that I heard during the conference was, we're used to, Terraform apply or the vagrant up, right, is like how I would bring up a development tool on my computer. And so they wanted to make it as simple as that to kind of deploy and understand, how we're going to deploy a piece of software, right? And so that's great for running from your laptop and like getting it going. But when it comes to orchestrating it end to end, you want to be able to orchestrate that kind of consistently on every commit or, every push to the main branch. And so that's where GitLab comes in, is to help you run those waypoint commands within a GitLab pipeline so that you can kind of like automate that going forward.
Got it. So it almost exists. So the waypoint command is a one-time kind of thing in there, and this orchestrates it across your entire pipeline, which could be multiple microservices.
Exactly.
Going
Yeah.
on in there.
Yeah. The destinations for Waypoint are plugins similar to, again, the best analogy is probably Terraform here, where Terraform does this great job of kind of wrapping all of these cloud APIs and other things into a simple declarative syntax for creating infrastructure.
Right.
Waypoint kind of does the same thing for deploying your application. So you can deploy to Amazon ECS, or you can deploy to EKS, or you can deploy to Google Cloud Run, or all these different kind of places that you might have as deploy targets for some or all of your infrastructure. Waypoint allows you to define that in one configuration file, and then again you can orchestrate that deployment through GitLab.
Excellent. And in terms of the go-to-market, I mean, it's open source, obviously, but will Waypoint sort of be bundled with a GitLab? Do you see that, if it's not now, in the near future, or not?
Right. I mean, I think you'll continue to see joint solutions from HashiCorp and us, right? So we've recently, added the ability to have Terraform apply happen and visualize that directly in GitLab. We're very excited about an integration with Vault to help people safely orchestrate CI/CD pipelines by leveraging, the amazing technology that Vault is. And so I think you'll continue to see this kind of collaboration. We're, again, two open source companies with very similar values, want to help organizations find the better way to deploy their applications and keep delivery and infrastructure management in like kind of lockstep and together. And so I think Waypoint's another step in that direction. We're excited to see where the project goes. I mean, they have a great roadmap. And so I'm assuming as that roadmap comes to fruition, we'll see more and more integration points with GitLab.
Absolutely. So, and in the meantime, it sounds like HashiCorp has another great open source tool that they've developed. I mean, Mitchell and the team there have just, I mean, you look from Vault to Terraform to Vagrant, of course, and Waypoint now. I mean, it's uncanny. It's not uncanny. It's hard work and understanding the market, I guess. But I mean, it's impressive.
Yeah, no, they have a fantastic team, of course, from Mitchell and Arlen, all down, and they're a fantastic partner for us. I think we share a lot of the same values, and it's great to see them, helping push software development forward.
Absolutely. You know what? We're gonna turn you into a reporter on the scene. What else did the Hashi conference kind of caught your eye, Brendan?
Right. So that's a great question. They also released another security product to kind of live alongside Vault called Boundary.
Yeah, actually, sorry.
Yeah, that's a very interesting product to me. The idea being that, eliminate this need for having, what people call them bastion hosts, inside of a VPC for people to, do multiple steps to dial into your production environment. And so I think that's interesting. I think that has an interesting connection with this concept of service mesh. Like, let's say I have this concept of service mesh. So I have all these different services out there. Okay, well, now how do I get to them when I need to? That is a kind of an unsolved problem that I think Boundary looks to solve. I haven't gotten a chance myself to use it yet, but I'm excited to. It's definitely a cool offering. They put on a great conference. I always enjoy going. They have fantastic speakers. But they drummed up a lot of excitement with the 2 new product releases for sure.
What about any potential integration points with GitLab and Boundary?
I know Boundary's sort of down the road, but
yeah, I mean, I could see an integration or 2 there. I'm interested to see where it goes. I mean, I think for sure that the idea of Boundary is to have, OAuth provided from anywhere. So it'd be interesting to see if, there was an interest for, GitLab OAuth there to be the central authorization. There may be an integration there. I'm not sure.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, let's turn away from HashiCorp for a sec, though, Brendan. And as long as I got you, what's happening at GitLab? Any news to share? Any kind of thing that you think the audience might be interested in?
Yeah, I mean, we're always releasing new things, always fantastic new things coming out for GitLab. We're really excited about 13.5, which will ship pretty shortly. Again, as I mentioned in GitLab 13.4, which just came out, we upped our game with our Vault integration, and actually it relates to this this conversation because it was our most recent release. It actually had a huge update for our integration with Vault. The other thing that I think is really exciting that we're looking at is we're building in a Kubernetes agent to GitLab. So you mentioned GitOps earlier. Yeah, you mentioned GitOps earlier, and of course that there's 2 kind of schools of thought of GitOps. Is it a push or is it a pull, right? And of course, GitLab CI/CD is a fantastic push into Kubernetes tool, but the Kubernetes agent is going to be a GitLab tool that can sit and live inside your cluster and monitor for changes and then pull those in a kind of the traditional GitOps way. And so we just released that as well, and so that's really exciting. I'm excited to see both where it goes and how our customers use that agent.
Very cool stuff, man. Time keeps marching on. Other than that, Brendan, everything else is okay with you working from home? We spoke a little bit earlier on. You moved into a new office in the house. You're out of the basement.
Yeah, I moved out of the basement. I have a window now. It's great.
It's great. It's the little things in life, man, that you grow to appreciate. I'm glad to see you got a window. Brendan, anything else you want to share? I think we covered most everything.
Yeah, I think we covered it all. I really appreciate the time to come on. I'd love to chat with you anytime, Alan.
I know. Feelings mutual. Brendan, you know what we didn't cover, though? For people who want to dive a little deeper on this GitLab Waypoint integration, where can they get some info?
Yeah, so if you look on our blog, I actually wrote a blog post. If you go to blog.gitlab.com, there's a blog post from October 15th about how to use Waypoint and GitLab together. I've got kind of a description of how it works, and then I also have a fully working repository if you just want to click on it and get at the code. I would definitely recommend checking out the blog.
Very cool. Brendan O'Leary, Senior Developer Evangelist at GitLab, Cloud Data. You're on the TOC at CNCF, Brendan? Or
I'm actually on the governing board. Yeah, I'm a member of the governing board of the CNCF.
I knew it was something. Yep.
Governing board member for CNCF. Here on TechStrong TV. Brendan, don't stay away so long.
I won't.
Okay, we'll have you back on soon.
All right, man. All right, this is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We'll be right back with another guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
Always good to catch up with Brendan O'Leary and my GitLab friends. Next up, as I mentioned, we're going to go to last week's DevOps experience, and I wanted, for the first one of the sessions from DevOps experience, I wanted to pick this one by Women in DevOps about the importance of a diverse workforce. It's by Lauren Langdell and Antonia Otter, and it's important. Well, it's a subject that's important to me. It should be important to you. And let's hear it now. The importance of a diverse workforce by Women in DevOps.
Good morning, good afternoon, or wherever you are in the world today. Hello. Thanks for tuning in to this morning's keynote on the importance of having a diverse workforce. My name's Antonia. I am the DAC Ambassador for Women in DevOps, and I am accompanied by Lauren, our founder of Women in DevOps. I'll give the stage to you, Lauren, to explain what and who we are.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, yeah, I just want to extend my personal thanks for joining us today. So, Women in DevOps, we are a community who are very driven on closing the gender gap within DevOps. In this kind of very male-dominated world, we are looking to amplify voices, connect that gender gap, and really just drive a huge amount of support for diversity groups within this space.
Yeah, I guess in terms of giving you a little bit of a background into how we were born, me and Lauren are both DevOps recruiters. Lauren, you have been recruiting in the DevOps space for around 6 years now, me a year and a half. So that will give you some context of how we know so much about the DevOps space and the diversity disparity within the field. I would like to ask you a question, Lauren, I guess, which is, can you name 5 leading women in tech?
I mean, I can, because I've done this presentation many times. But it's very interesting when you do ask others this, and especially those at school age. I even asked the CTO about a year ago, and the answer was no. And that's a problem, right? That is an outright problem.
Oh, exactly. So essentially what we do is we were founded by our parent company, Trust in in 2017, and we host a number, well, before COVID, they were in-person events. Now these tend to be webinars, getting like-minded people together, speaking about technical topics or diversity and inclusion and equity topics as well, just to support, engage, and elevate equality within the industry. Anything you want to add to that?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll tell you our story, because I think what's a very powerful kind of message is when we started as well, there was literally 12 of us in a bar. had no idea that we'd be in the position we are in today. We've now got over 4,000 community members. So the impact we've started to have is huge. And, you know, keeping with the times, we've now gone online. We have a Slack channel, which we'll share with you today. So you can all join that. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, just trying to connect with women in tech, diversity groups, backgrounds, transgender, LGBTQ+, in any aspect that we can.
Yeah. And although we are women in DevOps, we definitely seek to help underrepresented groups within the whole tech sphere as well, not just DevOps, just there are a million different areas where we can help. So yeah, moving forward, I guess it's no surprise to anyone that there is a huge imbalance of diversity throughout the tech industry. Inclusivity and low participation of women in particular is a long-standing global challenge. There are actually more men called John leading major companies than women leading companies within the UK at the moment, which is crazy.
I have to correct you there, Antonia. It's the US.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. But it's a great fact.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, US is a very big place. There's more men called John that lead major companies than women within the US, which is absolutely insane considering the amount of human beings that are actually in the USA as well.
I think more so as well that the problem there is that we don't have this like in-depth of leadership, and which we'll speak a little bit later on is at the education point, right? So at school level, at college, university, that women aren't transpiring to want to do computer science, to want to study gaming or infrastructure or networking or DevOps, or whatever that might be. So we need to start developing ASAP this step. So we have these aspirational leaders within the DevOps and the wider tech space. So, you know, young girls and women who are looking at doing like career changes have someone to aspire to. They understand that path. They have that, you know, that level of no idea what the word I'm looking for, but that level of connection and aspiration.
Yeah, no, I get you completely. And when we do speak about diversity, what we like to fit, or what we really mean, is embracing and empowering people by respecting and appreciating what makes us all different. So not just gender diversity, but age, ethnicity, religion, disability, sexual orientation, your education, your background, and your cultures. Bringing people together with different train of thought is something that should be celebrated and not hindered. So that is what we mean by diversity and inclusion. If you do a quick Google search, it shows us, sorry, I can't string a sentence together this evening. When we do one quick Google search, you can just see how historically undiverse technology still is, actually, to be honest. And there definitely has been more weight put towards increasing diversity within technology, but it absolutely is still a man's world. If we look at this data set here, when we look at the top 8 tech companies, women don't even make up a third of the technical teams or leadership roles, or even half of the workforce. And it goes back to exactly what Lauren said. We don't have female or diverse leaders to aspire to and look up to, and that's where we're coming in and trying to drive this change. Is there next one? Lauren, I know that you had something quite important to say here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really, really passionate, right, about the disconnect between education and the results. So here, for example, we're looking at 64% of females are studying a STEM subject at school, but only 3% are taking a tech career as their first choice. So what is happening to that 68%? What are we not doing that means that these females at school are not pursuing a career in tech. And I think, you know, that is quite an evident problem. And we can talk about this till we're blue in the face, right? And I definitely don't want to labour on the point there's a problem, right? We all know that.
Yeah.
I think it's very interesting when you break it down like that. And that's what we need to address, right? Because imagine the success from a product point of view, from a platform point of view, the talent that we're missing out from that 61% is probably very, very huge.
Yeah. And we've done quite a lot of research into this, which shows a bit why it does go from 64% all the way down to 3%. And it's definitely something that I myself can resonate with. So one of the biggest things that we have found out is actually it's the lack of information and marketing into what technical roles actually entail. I think we've all watched things like Silicon Valley, sitcoms like Silicon Valleys, or watched films and movies where typically the tech guy is always the tech guy and that same sort of person. So stereotypes are enforced from an extremely young age. It's definitely something which I'm quite embarrassed to admit now, as I am a DevOps recruiter, that it probably wasn't until 2 years ago after I finished my studies that I kind of made the link between, the code that is making my Instagram app, what that actually was. I didn't have a clue. Me, age 23, like I just didn't make that connection. And I think at school, it was never, obviously I could have gone out there and educated myself, but I certainly didn't have enough education into what computer science and coding actually was and what it could create. Because I think Instagram's pretty cool now as a 24-year-old. So I think that's something really important as well. We've mentioned the role models piece as well. It's not until I've been working in the tech space that I've met incredible female engineers who are absolutely amazing and kick ass at their job. But before that, I didn't have any role models either. I don't know, Lauren, if you have anything to add to that. It's just, yeah. Oh, you're muted.
We're going to touch on some points later, which I think will be really relevant. But let's give this some more context and read that.
Yeah, so let's give you some context as to why it's super important when we're actually looking at products and algorithms in our day-to-day. So there are 2 case studies that we would like to speak about. I'll go first on and I'll let you go on with your one. In the UK, and Lauren, you may be able to educate me a little bit more if there is a similar gym group that we have in the UK.
It'd be similar to like an Orange Theory or like the gym group, just like a cheap gym train.
Yeah, so we have an app in the UK. We have an absolutely huge gym chain, which is actually called The Gym. Quite imaginative. And there was a lady who joined up to the gym, and how you get into the gym changing rooms is you have a key card which you scan into to get in. So she was off to the gym for the first time, super excited to go, signed up online, all nice and easy, got to try and get into the changing room to get changed after she'd been at work, and for some reason that she couldn't get into the gym card. No one went back to the front desk. No one could work out why she couldn't get into the changing room. Absolutely no idea. So they scaled this back out to the tech team. And turns out that this lady who'd just come to the gym after work was actually a doctor, and something had been missed when males and females were being coded to be able to get into this changing room, and a doctor had only been given to be being a male. And when the gym looked back at the group of coders that were creating this program, it turned out that this was a group of men. And it's easy to say that you can make mistakes. Things do get missed, but you do think perhaps if there was a more diverse group of people creating the algorithm, or there was a female in there, she may have been like, one moment, maybe we've missed something here. It's crazy.
I think as well, that's a very small piece of the puzzle, the pie, right? But I think that screams volumes for what if that was a plane, right? Or what if that was a building manager who needed access to a fire escape, or whatever that might look like. It's these little things and small bias mistakes that lead to huge problems further down the line. So now it's time to correct this, especially as our whole world now is surrounded by products and algorithms and platforms. Like the possibilities are endless of what could have gone wrong in that scenario. And it's not just, mishap or misclassification, but everything that the thought process it brings together with a diverse team. Like, it's no secret that diverse teams contribute up to 30% more on the bottom line. They're more profitable. And a big part of that is diverse thought and feelings and everything that comes with that. So, for example, empathy is a big thing, I think, when thinking about our customer these days and who our customer is. And Facebook, actually, it was in 2016. You may well remember this yourself, when the end of year celebration used to be an automatic feature. It was your year in review feature. So there was a guy who it's really sad. He lost his daughter in the April to a brain. It was a brain tumor. It was cancer of some sort. Really tragic. And Facebook posted your year in review, and it was like your best moments of 2016. And they were all photos of his young daughter. And obviously that was like heart-wrenching, like for that to be altered on his wall without his permission, created a huge amount of upset. So again, like, we look at like some of these big tech giants and we look at their team, like a diversity, like where was the empathy there? Like, where's like the traction? Who called out like people, not all good memories are, not all memories are good memories. So it's just very, very small examples. And there's a good book actually that I'd really, really recommend, and it's called
Technically Wrong by Sarah Botcher-Watcher.
Yeah, it's technically wrong. And that goes on to talk about a whole host of other examples. It really kind of hones on about all these little things, and that actually the results are quite dangerous. So you have to diversify these teams. You don't have a choice.
Yeah, and I've read that book as well, and it's amazing how many little case studies are in there that you hear about in a day in and day out, and what the why can't I think of the word? What the consequences are of not having diversity at the forefront of your teams, right? So yeah, we've touched on why it's important. I think why it's important, but we've mentioned it already. Homogeneous groups create products that don't always work and do have faults, and that can actually affect your end user's life. And biased products, biased algorithms, that's the simple fact of it.
It's not good. So as we mentioned at the start, Antonia and I are DevOps recruiters for Trust and Soda. You'll see our logo and some of our colleagues here. And the reason we talk about recruitment on this isn't to plug Trust and Soda, although if you're hiring, give us a shout. More to tell you, like, the conversations we're having now with CTOs, DevOps managers, engineering managers is, how do I diversify my team? It's like, okay, Lauren, we understand why we're not having females come through our traditional recruitment methods. So what do we do? And that's kind of where Antonia and I's like expertise come in, and where we use all this information. And what we'd like to share with you kind of in the second part of this presentation is how you can hire a diverse workforce, and what you can do in your organizations now as a leader, as an employee, as a peer, because I do believe that everyone is individually responsible for contributing towards this movement, right? Whether you are an intern or a student, all the way up to a founder, everyone is individually responsible for having an inclusive and diverse mindset, and for making those decisions to hire a diverse team.
Absolutely. So yeah, as we said, the importance. I guess I've got a quick question for you, Lauren, as well. Just before we go on to that, any ideas? What do you reckon it would be? Bill Gates, more diverse team. What numbers would we be looking at?
Maths is not my strong point, but the reason why it's important, this question is important, right? Especially to those who aren't as bought in to me, to you and I, Antonia, with our kind of community-driven mindset, is if teams are up to 30% more profitable in their bottom line if they're diverse, and we look at Bill Gates' profit here, how much more money would he have made if his team is more diverse kind of through the years? It is a a shocking amount of money. So that's also just something to be mindful of. Like, you will be more successful, you will be more profitable as a business with a diverse workforce. But it's a bit aware of time, so let's move on.
Let's move forward.
Good stuff.
So I guess as well, going back to what you said, we have tons of people ask us, how can you attract women? Or actually, I don't get any women or diverse groups applying to the roles that we're advertising. And we've done a really interesting study, and it showed that a woman typically, I know there are more, it's more than just a male and female spectrum, but for data's sake, let's say a woman, they said that typically they have to feel like they match 80% of a job description to apply, whereas for males, typically this is at 45 to 50%. So that's just one reason that you may not have women or diverse members of communities applying to your workforce. And there are lots of other things that we think are super important as well. Something that I experience quite a lot in my daily business is that a lot of companies out there offer sports club memberships or a bursary for sports per month. I think you're offering that, and that's awesome. But childcare as well, I think, is as important as that as well. Lauren, I'm happy to let you take the rest of this.
Yeah, I think the main crux of what we're trying to communicate with you all here, right? You might not always have, and actually I doubt you will always have, quality inbound traffic for your hiring. So therefore you need to get creative and either create that inbound or create an attraction piece. So things like, who are your role models? What does your leadership team look like? What does your interview panel look like? Is that diverse? Great. If so, let's celebrate that. If not, what can we be doing to attract underrepresented groups? Like monitoring your culture and celebrating that culture with community groups like Women in DevOps. Do you have a diversity and inclusion ambassador? If you were to hire 10 engineers tomorrow and 5 of them are women, are they going to absolutely love that culture? Are they going to thrive? Do they have the tools they need to build success in your company? Things like thinking about childcare, working mums and dads, I must say, it's really, really important that we think about kind of working families. And the only good thing I think that's come out of COVID-19 is a springboard effect that actually we can work remotely and we can work remotely effectively. Hoping that when we return to normal, not that, I'm expecting to work from home full time, but I would like to see a degree of flexibility. And I think this will also act as a huge amount of leverage for working parents to be able to take that next step, to believe themselves, to create their own time to do so. So we need to get this a bit creative. Anthony, do you have the next slide?
Yes, I do.
So you think about also creating these opportunities. So widening the thought process of your leadership and embracing difference of opinions. Like, if you hire the people who look like you, who talk like you, who support the same soccer team as you, okay, we're not going to create this difference in opinions, and there's going to be lack of opportunities for others.
Yep.
And then also we just need to get smart, right? So creating clear objectives that everyone can be on board with. Like, this isn't a topic that we should shy away from. Sometimes talking about diversity and inclusion and racism and gender and dyslexia and, all these things, they're tough. These are tough, raw conversations to have with your hiring manager, with your colleagues, with your peers, but we have to have them. And as businesses, we need to make clear objectives of how we're going to hire, what our goals are in order to be successful. And to have those open decision-making conversations, scrums, stand-ups, whatever that might be. Create a D&I committee, celebrate that behavior, create the bar raiser, have stakeholder training, bring someone in externally to do this. Like, it's a tough job and you can't do it on your own. To create allies inside and outside of your company, share this with your friends at dinner party. Just get smart. There's some amazing literature out there. We've already mentioned Technically Wrong by Sarah Botcher.
Yeah.
That's how that's. There's plenty of podcasts. Go check out Women in DevOps. There's so many free Women in DevOps. And Antonia and I are here to always help if you've got any questions. But yeah, get smart.
Absolutely.
read up.
Absolutely. And something else that we absolutely can get behind as well is it's not the job of one person to be implementing diversity, inclusion and processes. We all have a social responsibility to do this. And something that we hear quite a lot on the market as well is from our diverse members of our community. And when they are retained into companies, they don't feel like they've got an equal part, or they don't feel comfortable, and that's not good for your retention if you are thinking purely on profitable terms about why you want a diverse team. And something that I would absolutely recommend everyone to do, everyone that's in a hiring process, is to do some unconscious bias training. We grow up with biases around us all the time. It's natural to have biases, but being aware of those biases, implicit and unconscious, that you grow up around, and any prejudgments that you have, you need to be made aware of that to be able to tackle that. And that is super important in your hiring, because a lot of companies as well, referrals are a great way to hire, right? We know that you tend to get someone that is similar to someone that's in your company, so you know they're going to do well, but actually that creates an echo chamber and does a complete opposite of what we're aiming to achieve, which is diversity. So unconscious bias training, really important. And think about referral leads and the sort of people you're getting in, because actually you need more diversity within that and not the same individuals.
Exactly. So I'm very conscious of time, but this is probably the most important slide. So maybe screenshot this, take a picture. But your talent pipeline, so understanding the problem is one thing. Then creating those goals, setting those goals, get creative, increase the environment that you want to hire into. Then focus on your talent pipeline. And when we talk about talent pipeline, I don't just mean getting the resumes through the door and interviewing. It's everything from the initial job advertisement all the way through to kind of 3 months to 6 months when they've joined you, right? And that retention. So there's attraction and there's retention. And the investment on that onboarding program, mentoring systems, looking at exit interviews and what can you learn from them about your culture, having those raw conversations with your teams, blind resume review, flexible working hours for working parents, all of these things. But ultimately, if you're an approachable organization, you'll have the ability to hire diverse candidates a whole lot easier. And once you're an approachable organization, the rest of it is going to be so much easier to implement.
Absolutely.
And so evolution for education. And I don't mean education from a college standpoint. I mean conversations like this, holding your managers accountable, holding your peers accountable. Why are we not having an emphasis on hiring diverse teams? I think we've got about 3 minutes left, Antonia.
Yep. This is our last slide. And if there's any questions, please pop them into the comment box. Be more than happy to answer them in the last 3 minutes. But yeah, I guess what we want to just round up and say is it's not a quick fix. It's not a quick win. It takes time. It takes energy. But knowing that you need to tackle it is the first step to take. And by doing that, actually, you're already ahead of some of your other competitors in the ballpark as well. But it's got to come from the heart. I don't want to hear this for profit, even if it is the only reason. Have a clear plan. Go out there and network. Leverage us, leverage our network as well. Create mentorship programs for people internally. Do training. Train people up. That's so important as well. They're more likely to stay with your company for longer as well. Just challenge your assumptions, that unconscious bias training. Hire someone and take that risk. It could be the best thing you've ever done. And yeah, not to plug us again, but if you need a specialist diversity and inclusion recruitment partner, then tap up me and Lauren. We have lots of ideas on how we can help yourselves.
Yeah. Sometimes, we've been growing our networks collectively for, I'm say about now 7.5 years, Women in DevOps for 4 years. Lots and lots of experience there to help you and your teams brainstorm how to hire and ultimately introduce you to diverse candidates, because building that talent pool really does take time. And yeah, please take down our email addresses. Follow Women in DevOps. We're always posting tips, our newsletter. We partner with the likes of JFrog, Circle CI, and they're always really kind, giving our members, community followers, like free software and t-shirts and giveaways and things like that. And we hope that you all follow our journey. And a huge thank you for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you. And feel free to connect on LinkedIn as well. Always more than happy to help.
Good stuff there by the DevOps women. Next up, it's our bi-weekly look at CISO Talk with my host, Matt Newfield, CISO of Unisys. In this episode, we're joined, as usual, by Mitchell Ashley of ASG Group, and then we're also joined by Julian Watts of Devo and Ben Carr of Qualys. It's a really great discussion about what is the responsibility of the CISO and how can they stay out of trouble. When should they disclose? How do they recognize a bad situation? We had 4 or 5 experienced security folks here. It was a great discussion. I think you're going to love it. Here now is CISO Talk. Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel, and we've got another great episode of CISO Talk for you. Let me introduce you to our fantastic panel today. First of all, I'm joined by my co-host on CISO Talk, Matthew Newfield, CISO at Unisys. Matt, welcome.
Always a pleasure to be here, Alan. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. And then also our other regular is the CEO founder of Accelerated Strategies Group, Mitch Ashley. Hey, Mitchell, welcome.
Thank you much. Good to be here.
Good to have you here. Our 2 guests for this panel are Mr. Julian Waits of Devo, who is the GM of their cyber practice. Julian, introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Alan. Well, you said it already. Julian Waits, GM of Cybersecurity for Devo Technology Inc.
Absolutely. And then last but not least, we have Ben Carr, who's the CISO over at Qualys. Ben, you want to give any background or anything?
Yeah, thanks, Alan. So yeah, as you said, my name is Ben Carr. I'm the CISO for Qualys. People are most likely, I'm sure, familiar with Qualys as a company. Been around the industry for quite a while, but I've had roles at Aristocrat, Visa, Nokia, so been in the security industry for quite a while now.
Excellent. Thanks. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us. So we have a really interesting topic we're going to talk about this week, and that is the role of a CISO when it comes to reporting and data breaches, being transparent to authorities, etc. I think we're all familiar that there's recently been a very high-profile incident where a CISO was charged criminally with kind of lack of performing their duties or a lack of transparency around reporting and so forth, and not doing the right thing, so to speak. We all have our views on whether this is right, wrong, a little of both. But let's dive right in. Matt, I'm going to ask you to kick off, if you don't mind, with some views on this, and then, panel, feel free to jump in.
Wonderful. So, it's a very interesting topic. The CISO role, cybersecurity roles are newer when you think of industry, and, prior to us recording, we were having, I thought, a very lively debate as where should the CISO sit? What are the responsibilities of the individual in that role, whether it be a general manager of security, CISO, CSO, I've started to hear CSIO. Where do they sit? What protections do they have? And what's the core responsibility should something happen, especially if something is made public or it happens where they wanted to do something. They can prove they may have wanted to do something, but were told to do otherwise. And let's flip that around to say, what if they go out and they are public about what has happened when they've been told not to by their senior leadership? How do you set up those protections? How do you set up that communication within the company? We're talking about this high profile out on the West Coast, but there's been plenty of situations where you could read the news where a cybersecurity executive was fired because they whistle blew, right? They had a problem with an audit, they had a problem with an auditor, they had a problem with a situation, and they wanted to do the right thing. And they were personally hurt by that, their reputation as well as their career and salaries. So we thought it'd be just a good conversation, Julian, Ben, and Mitch, just to open up and get your thoughts. Ben,
yeah, Matt, I was going to say that I really think it highlights kind of this change in or evolution in the role of the CISO, right? I think for a long time, CISOs came from kind of a technical background and were seen as subordinates of one of the other C-level roles. But I think ultimately, the CISO really needs to be seen as a true partner to the business and, at an equal playing field at that level, right? And some of the advice that we give in times of a breach or an incident, sure, we want advice from counsel to understand like what the legal implications are. Many CISOs aren't lawyers and don't have that experience. We want, advice from the CFO to understand like what the impact from a financial perspective is. But ultimately, I think, it's not just companies, but I think it's external influences are starting to look at CISOs as ultimately being responsible for the advice that's given with regard to security incidents or issues. And so in that regard, I think, many CISOs aren't used to thinking about, am I on D&O insurance, right? Am I covered, right? Like, what's my responsibility to not only the organization, but to third parties and to the government? I was mentioning, and not to make this go too long, but I was mentioning to you guys earlier, I think that many people aren't aware that things are changing from a governmental and a regulation standpoint. So Department of the Treasury, I think on the 1st of October, just released guidance, and I don't think it's necessarily a change, but they're making it official policy from the Foreign Assets Control Office that payment to ransomware for cyber criminals, where those cyber criminals may be in restricted locations or individuals, is not legal. And so, you may get advice that, we should pay the ransomware just to make it go away and get it under the radar. One, that's illegal. Two, what's your duty to report that happened and that, you had an incident, both from the perspective of, the cyber resiliency of the company as a shareholder interest, also the financial interest that you made that payment, right?
Well, let's be honest. Wow. I mean, let's really, if you think about it, you've said quite a few things here. Let's just hit with D&O insurance. I would be willing to bet you if we pulled in 500 CISOs that probably came from a very technical non-business background and don't have a real seat at the table, may work under a CIO, may even work multiple rungs under a C-suite executive. They may not even know what that is, not understand the implications. And you talk about laws and you talk about changes. It is interesting. I have been following that same situation when it comes to what's legal and not legal on paying ransomware. But when I talk into the communities that I'm a part of, a lot of people, the question they ask is, how did you find that out? How do you know about that?
Right.
It's because of where people sit. So, Julian,
well, it becomes even more confusing if you're asked to pay ransomware. How do you do the attribution on it, right? Like, in some cases, it may not just be possible. So the fact that you're paying ransomware to a non-attributable source may long-term down the road get you into quite a bit of trouble.
And where they are, that country may not be one of the restricted countries where you make the payment, but they are located.
The individual might be,
you
right?
don't know who they are. I mean, you're doing a Bitcoin. Julian works a ton.
real quick, you may be in a non-defensible situation in that you may think you're paying it to an adversary that's in the United Kingdom or in a good country. But if the government comes to you and says, no, we believe they're in a country that you shouldn't have paid to, now you have to prove? How are you going to do that?
It's impossible.
Yep, Julian.
Julian, you work a ton with the government. I know Devo has a significant cyber practice in the Fed space. What have you heard about this ransom? Have you heard about this ransomware thing yet?
I had never. So I know that in general, I knew the government does not smile on paying ransomware. But I'll tell you, as a practitioner, especially working also in the banking community, my advice in the past has been pay the ransomware. I mean, it's a business, and most criminals of this sort honor their commitment. But I will highlight that paying ransomware is very different than some of the other situations that we've been talking about. Yeah. Because the issue at with the greater issue, the other company we're talking about, I'll leave it at that, wasn't the fact that they paid the ransomware, is that they also paid to not have it disclosed. So you need to be very careful about how you split hairs with the law, especially when you're dealing with the government. Everybody's going to be hacked. The question is
disclosure, and also to the federal authorities, right? So
right.
It's not just public disclosure.
Yeah, Julian, and the details of, we're not getting into, very specific details and identifying anything. Like, I think, look, even some of those instances where, the CISO may make a determination, sometimes they're doing that under the advice of counsel or under the direction of the CEO. Absolutely. But that doesn't necessarily absolve them of, responsibility in some cases, right?
Well, it never absolves them of responsibility. I think, to your point, like, D&O insurance is only one thing. D&O insurance deals with paying your legal fees, doesn't stop you from going to jail. So the key is to always have something in writing with management, because I'm going to go to something that you said at first, Ben, which is the CISO needs to be seen as a representative of the executive team. And if the industry didn't learn that from Target, then we're just all stupid. You had a guy who basically worked his way from the mailroom all the way to the top as CEO of that company. And because of the way the breach happened and the way the disclosures weren't done, an entire executive management team lost their jobs. Board members were physically sued. But for CISOs today, and to your point, it's a matter of understanding what it means for you to manage risk, for Ben to manage risk, for Matt to manage risk for the organizations that they're responsible for, of course. Security is an attribute of managing risk. And then in alignment with doing that, what's the risk that the corporation mitigates for you? Because, again, it's not a question of when you're going to be hacked. You've already been hacked. The question is, what's the materiality and what are the ramifications from?
Isn't a big part of this, what you're referring to, is also whose authority or who has decision-making capacity in this, right? There's advice of counsel, there's a reputation of the company, there's impact to the company, shareholders, et cetera. Yeah, oftentimes that's led through the CEO or the executive team or a subset together, all working to say, what are we going to do? Sometimes you don't want to report because you don't want to have it affect your cyber insurance costs.
Right. Well, and I think CISOs often get caught up in this squishy middle ground, right? Of there's a discussion with legal and the CEO, right? But then there's also this ultimate responsibility to the board, but sometimes they're insulated from the board, right? In a subordinate way of a reporting structure. When ultimately, again, I think this really gets back to companies understanding the importance of cyber, understanding the importance of security to the organization, and 100%. Understanding that person really needs a relationship directly with the CEO and needs the ability to report directly to the board outside of that internal structure, to make sure that they're having that transparency. And that's ultimately what it's about. Like I listened to a talk one time from a lawyer saying, a lot of times mitigating these issues, even from a customer perception, is that transparency of the event happened, here's what we're doing about it, here's how we're remediating, here's how quickly we're recovering. And that can help out with the customer side. I think that transparency also helps out internally. It helps out with legal, right? And sometimes, ultimately, I think CISOs are probably going to need some type of external counsel to be able to have personal liability reliance, to be able to go out and say, hey, look, I have this thing. I'm ethically, I'm not sure how I do it. What's the advice of external counsel with relation to the role? And then I have the internal counsel with relation to my internal responsibilities. And ultimately, you've got to make the best decision for yourself in that spot.
Yeah,
Right.
and it's a lot of times CISOs are put in this weird predicament of, do I do the right thing for myself, my family, or do I do the right thing for the corporation? And I do quotes in the air, and I agree with everything you've said. Unfortunately, there are a lot of organizations in the world where the CISO is just not going to get a seat at the table.
Yeah, haven't
They're just not
involved.
And I've talked to CISOs in our community that keep getting pushed down. And when I ask, why are you down another rung, they didn't like hearing from me. They don't want to hear about the risks, right? They don't like the message. They don't like the story, and they go the other way. And I love the advice of external counsel and making sure that you're covered and doing the right thing. But I've also, I think us in the cyber community, you, Julian, and Ben, we have to continue to push for the fact that I would not work for an organization where I did not feel I have a voice.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Before I started at Unisys, when I was speaking to the executive team, I laid out what my expectations were, not because I'm something special, but I'm not willing to take a job where I feel like I could be at massive risk. And then it's about building your partnerships and relationships, right? Our chief ethics officer, compliance, what's your corporate crisis team look like?
Yeah, but Matt, most CISOs who are friends of mine do not have your maturity around that, right? It's about the job, it's about the purview, it's about how big the team is, about the budget. And the thing they think about last is what are the ramifications if things go wrong? Because what you just said is exactly right. The CISO has to take responsibility for it up front, walking into the role. And that's what I mean around defining these guidelines around what the organization will be responsible for versus what you can be held responsible for outside of breaking the law.
And Julian and Matt, I agree with both of what you said, and I think the nuance there is that most people coming from that, it's come from a technical side, right? And so they haven't been exposed to this area of the business, and stepping into the boardroom for the first time can be quite intimidating. Dealing with the CEO can be intimidating for people who aren't used to it. And so I think it's up to us as people who have the experience and who've done this before to kind of beat the drum, right? And I think when you go in for that interview for your first CISO opportunity, if they say, hey, you're going to be reporting to the CIO, I think that's a red flag. Like, we should look at that a little bit as a red flag, right? It's typical. I think to Matt's point, it's still typical. And I think, Julian, you mentioned this too. Like, if you look at the number of Fortune 500 companies that have, CISOs who report to the CIO, it's not a zero number, right?
It's probably 80%.
Yeah, that's a problem, right? But we need to recognize that as an industry, and we need to keep highlighting that. And I think if you go into that discussion and you say, either with the recruiter or with the internal, when you're looking for that job, and you say, look, I'm really concerned, and I don't know if this is the right fit for me because this isn't a direct reporting relationship, and I think the importance of the CISO is X. I think that sets you up in a different caliber of role, right? I think you're perceived as a participant in the organization and not just somebody who's doing a role. And so I think that's important, is to set up the conversation right. It takes some fortitude, because it can be a little bit challenging, but I think that's ultimately what we have to do.
What are some of those questions that you would advise or all the team would advise people to ask in that kind of situation? What are the right things to look for that are positive signs this is going to work?
Do we have a procedure in place for crisis management in light of a material breach? I mean, that's one of the first things, because that tells you whether you have a CEO and a board that are even concerned about it in the first place. If it's a large corporation and they haven't thought through that, that's the first red flag for me, that there's a lot of work to do here if I take this job.
When's the last time the CISO has reported directly to the board?
And how frequently?
Is there how frequently? Is there a cyber risk committee? Not just a risk committee, because that could be just business, but is there a cybersecurity and risk committee? How often does it meet? Who is the chairperson? I mean, there are a lot of these questions, but I think Julian and Ben hit on something that's really important, and it's the background. I think it's easy for us to say, because Ben, with your background, Julian, with your background, you have business. So I will make the assumption that you both are very comfortable having a conversation with a CEO, a business executive, or a board about the business.
No, it's fair.
What I see a lot, though, is CISOs who get that opportunity, they get really excited, and they go in front of the board and they go, all right, my first slide shows we got attacked 4,000 times, and we stopped this many viruses.
I've seen it 1,000 times. I agree with you.
And it's the constant. It's the thing you hear from the board or from the CEO is like, I'm not getting the data I need, right? But the CISO doesn't know how to do it because they're exposing technical issues, and what they need to expose is business issues. It's a different level of conversation.
Risk.
Yeah, it's risk.
It's risk.
Yes.
Guys, I got to get a word in here. This is the quietest I've ever been. I think one of the, and you touched on it a little bit, but let's be really clear. How many CISOs out there are first-time CISOs? They are grateful and eager to just have the job. They don't have the leverage, Matt, to do the say and demand the things you and Ben are talking about. Julian, to your point, right? Look, man, I've been a security admin, and I got my CISSP a bunch of years ago. I took some SANS classes. The last CISO got fired because he wasn't kowtowing to the CEO. And now they want to make me the CISO. And I'm going to get a big raise, and I got that C title.
Alan, you're so right. I have a number of people who, they may not be first-time CISOs, but they haven't passed the third gig yet. They started off as technologists, not as business people. Even with their college education, it could have been in anything, English, whatever. It lent itself to technology and what they do. And you're right, they're grateful for the position. A perfect example for me is my first CEO opportunity. Before I even knew I wanted to be a CEO in a startup company, it got offered to me by a startup that was doing great in the Bay Area in the early 2000s. Turns out they were doing all kinds of things with backdating and everything else. And I would have been too ignorant and immature to even understand what the ramifications were. The flip side of that, though, is there's never been more education freely available to people to understand that their job, CISOs, is really about managing risk. Because I have a close CISO friend today. It is his first CISO's gig. He reports to the CIO, so I'm going to go right after what Ben said. CIO is a friend of his. It's a financial institution. And on the IT side of the shop, they're woefully behind in the practices that they have around core cyber hygiene stuff. We use Qualys as an example. Like, are our machines patched? Are we doing all of these things? And his peer typically isn't doing it. Yet the CIO is a friend of his who gave him this great opportunity. And half our conversations are, Julian, what do I do? Because if we have a breach, I'm aware of this. I have the reports that show it all. And I'm being held back from giving this information to management because my manager doesn't want me to get these other people in trouble.
So that's real life.
That conflict happens all the time. That for me is the biggest reason. Well, it's one of two biggest reasons, right? The one we've been talking about, but the secondary reason is like this conflict that always exists if you report to the CIO. I mean, it's just a natural conflict of interest. Like it's a horrible position to be put in for a CISO.
There's no independence, to your point.
Yeah, you're always calling out the problem that your boss has, right? And so there's no win.
Your job is to be the scapegoat. When you
Absolutely. I used to have a really good friend, unfortunately. Mitchell, you might have known. He passed away a bunch of years ago, a guy named Rick Dakin. Rick was the founder of Coal Fire Systems. Big security thing. And I used to laugh. Rick's office was up the road from our office at Still Secure, and we used to get together pretty often. We had a partnership. Rick used to love going into the board, going to the C-level people, and he'd start his shtick off with, how do you look in stripes? Right? Because this is what Sarbanes-Oxley.
That's a great way to do it, though.
Right. How do you look in stripes? And Rick would go right from there and really kind of put the fear of God into these people about, hey, you've got a responsibility. And he wasn't dealing with CISO per se. He was dealing with CEO, CIO, CFO, right? Risk management. But it's just as true today for CISO, right? You've got a way, your friend Julian, in the position he's in, he's got a way, messing up his position, fighting with his friend versus how do you look in stripes?
Well, and here's the crazy thing. He actually loves his job in general. because he is working for a friend who supports him. But at the same time, what I keep telling him is he needs to weigh, because he doesn't go home feeling good every day, right? He goes home.
You can't.
I'm not doing the right thing. I should be doing things differently. I've encouraged him he should start looking for another job, actually, because if that's to Ben's point and to Matt's point, it's an untenable situation, because when things go wrong, and they will, he will be the first person that gets fired and worse.
What is reporting about?
If you went back 10 years, right, like probably even 5 years, that was kind of masked, right? Like if things went wrong, like, yeah, you might lose your job, but the role hadn't elevated. And I think that's the difference now, is you're seeing where it's starting to target this issue of how do you look in stripes, right? Like what's the fiscal impact to you, right, from a lawsuit or something that happens? Like even if you've done everything right, like I do some other things outside of cyber that the same thing is true. Like even if you've done everything right, you can still get sued. And the impact to that is huge, right? I mean, just the lawsuit is going to be financially draining, and it's not going to make you feel good at the end of the day. So you've got to think about that on the front side to minimize that risk.
Well, and the reputational damage. So let's say you don't get sued. Are you going to get another job, right? And how do you explain that? And so we should switch the conversation, because I think we get all this. So how can we help? Because one of the things that I think you all have said here that I absolutely 100% agree with is that there are many people in these roles that don't have the backgrounds and the skills necessary to truly be successful, that may be working for people who also don't have the background, skills, or foresight or understanding of the roles to allow the people who work for them to be successful. So how do we, what do you think about how do we change this industry? How do we fix this?
Well, I think it starts with some of the organizations that educate the community, meaning I'm going to have this conversation with ISC Squared. They got a new CEO recently. And I think a part of becoming a CISSP or any of these other roles that we think about, we need to start thinking about risk ramifications to the people who are serving in these roles. It's part of the problem is the community itself. We love to talk about technology. Everything's about technology. And there's still not enough discussion about the business of being in security, meaning what you should know, what you represent, and what you need to protect yourself against.
That's fair, Ben?
I think that's really true, Julian. I think, how many times do you go to, Black Hat, RSA, like everything is about the tech.
Everything.
Right? And we need to start doing these kind of things, having these thought leadership discussions. Like I'd love to see a panel on this at every conference, right? At everything that happens, I'd love to see thought leadership from leaders who've been around and who've done it to start to tell people and start to create that buzz and that discussion. I think it's a twofold thing. One, you've got people in security who don't have the experience and don't know, right? And are coming up and are enthralled by their first time role at this very senior management level. And then you've got the other side of the business that also doesn't really know. They don't understand security, right? I mean, often a lot of times the reason why they're having a hard time digesting it is because they don't understand the very specific technical issues of it, right? And they see it as very technical. And we need to bring those two sides together to understand that this is a area of the business that's a risk area that has to be addressed properly, right? You wouldn't put a CFO, just go do the Excel. Like I don't want to hear about you on the risk to the company, right? Right. You wouldn't want a legal guy just don't talk to me about risk. Just make sure the contracts are okay, right? Like that's not the discussion that happens in the boardroom.
But that's where we need to come in. One of the things that I find interesting is probably like all of you, we mentor people. And one of the first things that I try to push on anybody at our level that I'm mentoring is board. How do you deal with the board? How do you talk to a board? Because most people do it wrong. And I think a lot of it is also incumbent on us as individuals in this field to be out there talking, to be out there mentoring and raising voice in panels like this to try to get people to think differently.
You're right.
It's a significant problem. And it's not just about the CISO going to jail or being sued. It's about the CEO. Mm-hmm. It's about Target. The fact that Target still comes up on a very regular basis just proves how bad it was at a major retailer. And then
it forced an evolution in the way we think about it.
And look what happened at AP Moeller Maersk with a similarly awful situation, but they're all still employed.
Right.
And got raises and bonuses and did well. And that whole breach was, I mean, disaster for them.
Right, you're right.
Transparency and reporting and, you know, all of the things that they did and where that CISO sat and how they dealt with that situation made it so that they didn't lose their job and they were almost looked at in the region as heroic.
Right. It's true.
I love what you're talking about, elevating the conversation and making that more public. I don't want to go too far with this, but is there a way to put people or to help people not be in the untenable position of just deciding by themselves or with their lawyer what to do? Is there some sort of norms we can start to establish? And I don't know if it's as far as a code of conduct. That's probably taking it way too far, but at least this is what is common of best practices of CISOs to do in their businesses. So you're fitting within the norm when you're handling these situations in your job. Is that even
transparency? And quick crisis teams. I'll throw my thought out because I'm actually really passionate about this. If we have risks and situations that arise within our own organization, it is not for me and two of my direct reports to go, shh, get rid of it. We have a corporate crisis team. It is made up of the appropriate individuals in our organization and leaders, and we bring it to them. We'll have the call, we have the meeting. We may decide we're good, but it's documented, it's transparent. Any risks that we feel we had have been noted. And if our chief ethics officer, our CEO who's part of that, our chief legal counsel make a determination, they made a determination. The interesting thing for us is if I completely disagree, I have a choice. I can stay or I can leave. But I brought it to corporate crisis. But Julian, to your point, it requires wherewithal, experience, and the confidence that we're doing the right thing. And I don't know that a lot of people have that.
Well, so Mitch's point, though, because I'm sensitive to it because I try and do it, but it's how do we collectively come up with a way for CISOs and other practitioners to have something that they can fall back on, almost like a Bible of here's the things that you need to bring to bear when you're thinking about taking this position, or if you're already in a position. Like, you remember, Matt, one of the
sounds
things
like we all agreed to publish a book right now.
Jointly, here we go.
This is, I haven't seen a book, like this is a topic that is ripe for,
handbook.
Yeah. Not a how to pick the right vendor, how to, right? I mean, it's the risk issue of like, how do you deal with the ethics and issues of being a CISO, and how do you interact with the board, and how do you verify that your company's taking it seriously?
Well, again,
the CISO's Guide to Survival. I'm sorry.
Again, to the point that we all made, but specifically Matt and Ben made when we first started the discussion, right? It's about the evolution. I think Matt was one who said, "Hey, look, CISOs, maybe 10 years. I mean, we all probably know who the first CISO was, right, at Citigroup. And the issue becomes, it's like everything with evolution. Like, many of us discovered that we were musicians when this call first started, because you saw the saxophone. I was a jazz performance major in college. When I went to university, there weren't schools or people who taught you how to protect your music yet. And so theoretically what would happen, you have these great musicians where all their rights and everything were taken from them when they signed their first contract. Now the industry has evolved to there's not a major university you can go to where there isn't a class about the business of music and how we do it. And I think maybe where we're at in the security industry is it's time for us to have that next evolution as well, where we speak out more about it. To Ben's point, maybe this is time for a book to talk about this, because Gary Hayslip is a very strong friend of mine. He's written now several books about what it means to be a CISO, but even in that case, it talks more about the cyber hygiene and what the job of a CISO is, but it doesn't talk about how CISOs also need to be concerned about the things that we're talking about today, how they protect themselves, and what is kind of this code of ethics that you don't want to break, kind of like the Hippocratic Oath if you're a doctor, right? Do no harm.
Coming up with, you can't call it the Hippocratic Oath, but coming up with that, that to your point, that oath drives doctors. If the hospital tells them not to do something, they have an oath that they've taken when they became that CISO. That we're starting to see, and we started this whole conversation about the unfortunate situation, whether it's true, it's not true, whatever it be around a particular CISO who the Justice Department is looking at right now and filing charges against. If they had some sort of a Hippocratic oath that they had tied themselves to and they violated it, that'd be one thing.
Yeah,
exactly.
But if they didn't violate that Hippocratic oath, but went against their corporation, that's a completely different.
Have a leg to stand on, right?
Absolutely. Very interesting.
So Julian, you mentioned you're talking to ISC Squared, right? I don't know if it's a book or is there a CISO certification that we come out with?
It could be. It could be both.
That actually, part of that is the ethics of a CISO, right? Ethics of CISO and stuff like that.
I think there's a training, right? I know that there are some CISO training programs, right? And they're out there, and I can't speak to the efficacy or the validity of them. But right. I almost wonder if there's like a professional organization of CISOs that needs to be started, right? Where it's like you do that. Part of it is like there is this, the Hippocratic oath. There's a foundational component to it, but part of that is you become a member, and then there's some level of like mentoring. There's some level of being able to ask for reference on like I'm unsure how to deal with this, right? Like
that's a must.
Right? We haven't done that. We haven't banded together, and we haven't said, look, it's like there's the CISO professional organization, and their best practice says that the CISO reports to the CEO. Their best practice says that you report at least quarterly, right? Like, and you can go into the board and say, look, like there's 1,000 CISOs that are part of this. They're part of, all of Fortune 500 is a part of it, and this is the accepted best practice for what we do. And if we don't do it, like we're taking a huge amount of risk by violating just best practice, right? Like, why doesn't that exist for us?
I agree with that.
Idea.
With if you think about privacy, they have all sorts of communities. Ethics has all sorts of communities. Legal, IT. I mean, there are so many CIO organizations, but you're absolutely right.
There's nothing for CISOs.
Nothing, and I think this is the team to start one.
Except informal.
I like that idea.
Except informal stuff that really focuses still more on concepts and ideals, but nothing that deals with the efficacy of being a CISO.
Not the tech. It's a professional body, right? It's a professional organization.
Yeah, that's the way it should be.
Because unfortunately, that's what you're talking about. The evolution of how this CISO position came to be, is it didn't come from people who went to business school and are now learning the tech. 99.9% of all CISOs came from the tech and had to learn the business.
Including the first one.
Including the first one. And Mitchell and I were selling to Citi back then.
Yep.
They actually had, if you remember, Mitch, they had 3 CISOs, right? At that point, they had 3 different ones. And, they told us that it takes 60 to 90 days to implement a patch. We were trying to sell them vulnerability management. And it kind of blew my mind. Yeah.
It hasn't changed much.
Yeah, it's gotten worse.
I guess I didn't need to qualify that.
Hey, that's next week's episode. But no, I mean, seriously, if I was 15 years younger and had 12 things less on my plate, I would take this as a mission to go out and do it. Maybe someone out here is listening. Go do it. We need a CISO organization. I think CISOs would readily jump at the chance, and not only that, just to even have an ear, a shoulder, a trusted advice peer, a peer-to-peer relationship,
a book,
book that they can go, the Little Red Book of CISOs or whatever. Yeah, and it's a shame. Unfortunately, some poor SOBs may wind up going to jail over this, and whether you believe right or wrong. Right, it's going to happen, and that's a real problem, guys. We're about at the end of our time though, so I need to kind of wrap it up. I'm going to give each of you a chance though to kind of make your closing arguments, as long as we're doing legal, and we'll wrap it from there. Julian, you went last to start, so I'm going to ask you to go first to finish.
Absolutely. And thank you. First of all, this has been an honor to be on this with you guys. I've really enjoyed it. In the concept of closing arguments, cybersecurity, just like any other function of a business, is there to support the business. Its design is not just to protect the business from attacks and all this other stuff, but it's to manage the risks to the business when those attacks occur. It is a serious job that requires serious attention that needs to be driven and managed from the top of the organization. And if it's not done that way, it will not be done well and it will not meet its purpose.
Absolutely.
Ben?
Yeah, no, that was good, Julian. I don't know how to follow that up. Yeah, no, I really believe that cybersecurity has evolved to a risk function, and it needs to evolve to a risk function. It needs to be taken seriously by the business, and I think it is really up to us as a community to band together and kind of move that ball forward, both from as people who aspire to be CISOs, as well as companies who need CISOs to actually function and function well and securely.
Fair enough, Mitchell.
Yeah, I think this has been a call to action. I didn't expect that to come out of today, but whether it's fully this team or we inspire some others to be part of books, maybe something in the university setting, society, whatever that is, it seems to me a super valuable and noble thing to take on. I don't mean that in a too funny of a way, but it is something I think we need, and I hope that we together or individually do something with this call to action.
Matt, take us home.
So I'll close it out. Thank you all so much. It's been an honor to speak with you all today. And I'll close it with, I agree with everything we've discussed. And the final point to me is, I think too many people that may have grown up in technology and have taken these roles would look at you, Ben, look at you, Julian, or myself as adversaries almost, because we're competing for jobs or, it's competition. And I think one of the things that is going to be key in the success here is to realize that we're not adversaries. We're actually peers. We're all peers. We're all on the same side of this situation that we see ourselves in. And if we can come together and band together, that it's not, wow, I can't give Ben some information because, Ben may take my job or Julian may take my, we got to stop thinking that way. And it does come down to that base psychology of, again, we're a team. We really are a team that we get paid by different organizations.
Absolutely. Hey, gentlemen, and next time we will have a lady. We tried for this one. We just couldn't pull it together. But gentlemen, thank you for joining and contributing to this episode of CISO Talk. What a great one. I'd love to have all of you back on soon, maybe. Similar topics, continue this topic. It's good stuff. Ben, Julian Waits, Ben Carr, thanks for joining us. Mitchell and Matthew, as always, thanks for riding shotgun with me here. This is Alan Schimmel for CISO Talk. We'll be back with another episode in about 2 weeks. But for now, be well and be safe. Bye-bye. Now it's time to bring in our Media Ops Chief Content Officer, Managing Editor, Charlene O'Hanlon, who's going to give us a preview of the headlines around the Media Ops sites with the news, as well as an interview with Prince Kohili, Automation Anywhere on RPA. RPA, giving us a preview of the rest of this week's great webinars on Media Ops.
Hi, everybody. Happy Tuesday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the Tuesday edition of the news headlines. Over on DevOps.com, we have an article that looks at how Logs.io ate its own dog food to find the source of a performance issue that had been plaguing its systems. It's an interesting case study. Through its logs, the company had been noticing anomalies to its traffic that was impacting performance at every particular time every single day. By scanning its logs, looking at its metrics, and using distributed tracing, the company was able to identify the source of the performance issue and fix it quickly. It's really fascinating, and it's definitely worth a story worth checking out. Also, we have an article that looks at DevSecOps from the business point of view, making the case for DevSecOps as a way for organizations to save money by reducing cost overruns resulting from delays in production. They also avoid costs associated with being the victim of a data breach, including IP and data theft, legal and non-compliance fees, and the inevitable loss of reputation. In news, Tricentis announced it has added visual test design and automation technology based on artificial intelligence to its Tosca platform. Tosca 14 automatically recognizes and identifies visual user interface elements and controls access across any form factor to identify the most appropriate tests to run as an application is being developed. The approach enables testing to be shifted further left during the application development process. Iterations of an application are developed, according to the company. Over on Container Journal, we take a look at a recent survey from Zerto that looks at backup and recovery from a container perspective. The stateful nature of container applications means backup and recovery needs to be handled using a different approach. Yet, according to the survey, 3/4 of respondents said they expect container-based applications to be backed up the same way as any other application. It's clear education and a healthy dose of automation are necessary to ensure container-based apps are protected in the safest and most efficient way. And on Security Boulevard, we have a deep dive into the indictments last week of 6 Russian GRU intelligence officers for a bevy of cyber crimes, including malware attacks on business and critical infrastructure worldwide, and the Pyongyang Olympics, spear phishing campaigns to derail the French elections, and the investigation into the poisoning of Russian dissident Sergei Skripal and his daughter and various UK citizens, and a host of other high-profile cybercrimes. The article goes into detail on the investigation and subsequent identification of the members as GRU officers, and it reads like something out of a spy novel. If you don't think election interference can't happen here, reading this article just might change your mind. We also have a follow-up to the zero logon vulnerability to Windows servers that was discovered a few months ago, and Microsoft has released at least one patch so far. The destructive nature of zero logon makes it a particularly dangerous vulnerability, so organizations need to apply patches to protect themselves. Microsoft has planned a multi-phase approach to patching this one, lest users think they can simply apply the patch and move on with their lives. The takeaway from this article is simply this: keep patching. All right, that's all we have for today's news headlines. Please check back on Thursday for more news that we have from DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. Until then, please have a great day. Stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops, and I'm here now with Prince Coley, who is the CTO of a company called Automation Anywhere. Prince, thank you so much for taking the time and talking with me today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Charlene. I'm very happy to be here.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I'm interested in the topic of robotic process automation. I know it's something that you guys are very much invested in, but I know that a lot of organizations are using RPA to help accelerate their digital transformation efforts, and also to help them kind of stay resilient, especially in the face of COVID-19. But I also understand that there could be some security issues related to, their rush to digitally transform. So, how is it that RPA is playing a role in digital transformation as it relates to security?
Okay. So if you allow me, I will spend just a quick minute on just defining what RPA does, because that allows people to then talk about security in the right context. So RPA really is a robotic process automation, as you said. It allows customers, allows users to build and deploy software robots, and bots is a typical term that is used, which work side by side with humans, and it automates many of the things that humans do. In many ways, what a lot of people do in an enterprise is somewhat rules-based, and even when it is not rules-based, it is somewhat predictable. So what bots can do is they can observe what you do and then automatically build the right software and allow you to run that software.
Okay.
Now you can just imagine the power that brings, right? There are so many places, whether it's the airline industry or the healthcare industry or industrial automation, whatever industry you pick, there are places where bots can bring a lot of value. Sometimes it reduces risk. Sometimes it brings scale. Sometimes it makes sure people are not put in places that are dangerous to them. For example, oil platforms. So taking it back to your question about security, security is a multi-headed beast. But the way to think about this in RPA is that first is, are the bots safe? That is the first question that should be asked. And since the bots really act like people, the best way to keep bots safe is really to deal with them like you deal with people. Meaning you give them the same kind of rights and privileges and the same kind of controls. So if you want to make sure that people don't do bad things, you want to make sure a bot is then given the same level, access levels and tracking auditability as a person would. That allows people to then, that allows an IT team to know exactly what is going on, to stay on top of what a bot is doing, and to actually get better trackability because it's software in the end, not people. People don't self-report, a bot will self-report. It's a favorite topic of mine. I can go on forever, but why don't you tell me why?
No, it's great. It's great. I love hearing about it because, we are seeing increased use of bots at all points in the enterprise, from marketing bots on the website, to kind of help with customer service issues, to bots that are helping in accounts payable offices to help expedite payments for vendors. So it's really fascinating to see how well they've been received in the enterprise. But I really don't think a lot of folks have really taken into consideration some of the security implications of using bots. So, it seems like it's kind of a double-edged sword technology, security-wise, when we've got this great technology, but it, like anything else, is not impervious to cyber attacks. So, what are some of kind of the best practices then that organizations need to think about when they are, adopting, robotics and automation and chatbots and other, automated processes?
I think that's a great question. The best way is to say that think of bot as a super worker, but create the right boundaries and perimeters around it and to protect it like you would protect your own employees. So if, for example, you want to make sure you don't get into a DOS attack, someone is trying to attack you or trying to go and change the software of a bot, you would do the same thing for any of the software in your enterprise. For an application that sits on your desktop or my desktop, IT will provide multiple layers of defense. The bots will therefore have to be protected no more and no less, like you would protect anything else. The bots bring actually a major advantage in terms of security. One is bots won't click on phishing emails, right? They won't go and click random emails and allow you to put a virus in. But more importantly, maybe, is because whatever bots do is trackable, and they will auto-report, auto-log whatever they did. It is also easily auditable later. For example, if something were to happen in an enterprise, someone is about to attack you, you can see exactly what happened. Humans will forget; they will not know. A bot will always know, right? So in terms of best practices, I would say just remember, treat a bot like an employee in your company, and use the same security, give it the same identity, and the same key management kind of rights.
Yeah, I would actually say that some people might not actually like that answer, because you don't want to treat a bot like a human too much, because there are certain people who think that the bots are going to be taking over and taking jobs and things of that nature. But it seems to me that you could actually employ bots to do tasks that maybe would be physically detrimental to humans, and just that because bots are so useful in that respect, because to your point, they should be treated like humans, but they're not humans, so they're not privy to, or they're not as what's the word I'm looking for? Where they're not susceptible, if you will, to certain things that humans would be.
You're absolutely right, and I will speak to the point you raised earlier. So I can talk to what it is that we would like to see, but it is maybe better and more honest to talk about how our customers deal with bots. So we have more than 4,000 customers in 90 countries. So we are all over the world. And what we've observed without fail is that bots are used to augment people. Bots are used to make someone's life better, not to take someone's reduce someone's scope. It is only a person can actually do more because they have a bot right there to take care of things that, for example, look at the beginning of the pandemic, there are a couple of very big airlines, top few airlines. They used our software to deal with cancellations of people who were calling in and trying to get either cancel a ticket or use the credit that they got, book another ticket. Many of those things went through the roof, right? You could remove the holding times. They went through, it was like 100x before. Bots allow you to do all that without a person going mad trying to do it, right? You can't throw people at that problem because your end users are suffering. It is not about not just a person who is a CSR, the customer support rep, but also the people who are waiting on the line. So bots bring that value to the CSR who says, now I can deal with 10 times the people I could earlier. I can create better customer sat, right? That matters. And I would say across the board, we have seen that bots help someone. They don't. We have not seen them hinder or bring risk to people at all.
Excellent.
And sorry, second point, bots also, of course, allow people to scale. But we have actual examples where in an oil natural gas platform, they don't want to send people on a helicopter or a boat to do some things when a bot can do that. It's just too risky. And in a mine as well, similar example.
Yeah. That's kind of where I was going with that. Is it's absolutely they could be used to do the dangerous tasks, if you will. But what about infrastructure though? Are there any implications or are there any considerations that organizations need to keep in mind when they are looking to implement automation from an infrastructure point of view? Is this is this something that takes up a lot more resources, or is there something that maybe they could just use as a cloud implementation and use their existing infrastructure, or how does that work?
So one of the major reasons that people go for RPA is to digitally transform their company and to take away some of the more mechanical work from help people with the more mechanical work. You don't want to, when you're digitally transforming, you don't want to get caught up in the same old analog world. So our best practices recommendations have always been use the cloud. Cloud has infinite elasticity. You don't have to worry about it. For example, in our cloud, we will maintain it for you. We will make sure of upgrades and everything else. You'll get features for free. So best practices is use the cloud. Let the cloud provider and the RPA vendor in this case, let them take care of everything else. You worry about the things that you need to worry about, your processes, your workflows, your tasks, and let all the infrastructure be someone else's problem, right? You should not have to deal with infrastructure. And that also positions you well to modernize your own company.
Interesting. We've been hearing a lot about digital infrastructure over the last 6 or 8 months, especially as companies have recognized that digital transformation is something they have to do to stay alive these days, and not just, it's no longer kind of a, well, we'll get to it when we get to it. It's kind of, they got to do it. So how much is automation part of that conversation are you hearing? Is it something that maybe they're thinking about in their first phase digital transformation strategies, or are they looking at it maybe a little farther down the road?
So automation is for them almost definitionally a part of a digital transformation. And if you look at, if I had to do a very, very gross generalization, if you look at processes that handle paper versus processes that don't handle paper too much, even over there, like paper handling is probably the most analog process you can think of, right? It's paper in the end, right? Someone has to look at it, read it, do something with it. That is almost the first thing you want RPA to handle. You want to say, okay, RPA, I'm going to drive the machine that scans the paper, reads the paper, understand what the paper says, use AI as needed, understand what the paper says, and then act on what the paper says. Invoice handling, legal documents, healthcare, paper is everywhere. So if you can take away that millions and tens of millions of paper and digitize it, and then end to end, maybe then there'll be no paper in the end. Our vision is that in 5 years, we will allow you to remove all paper from your company. Because why do you have to handle paper? Then this couples directly with the second piece, which is once you have looked at the data may come from paper, it may come from IoT devices, it may come from other parts of your company. You analyze the data, which is part of RPA, use AI bots to do that, and then you act on it. And that is also RPA, because RPA drives actions, because it drives your applications, your processes. So in our customers, when they say digital transformation, RPA becomes one of the fundamental and core pieces of how they think about it, pretty much across the board.
All right. Well, that's great to hear that it's actually becoming a primary or an elementary part of the digital transformation process. I think folks are recognizing the value of automating all the things so their employees can be more productive and drive greater value to the business. Prince, thank you very much.
And the employees are happier. Sorry.
Yeah,
employees
well,
are happier,
hey, you
right?
know what? That could be. That's the most important thing at all at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, Prince, thank you so much for walking me through it. I really do appreciate it. It's really fascinating to me to see all the use cases for automation, and I would love to have you back on another time to talk more about automation and what you're kind of seeing in the landscape as more organizations are adopting automation.
I would love to do that, Charlene. Thank you for the wonderful discussion.
All right, great. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community, digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Hi, everybody. Happy Tuesday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here now with the Tuesday edition of the Webinars Preview. We have so many great webinars, both upcoming and on demand on the sites. Just wanted to let you know about some of the ones that are coming up immediately that I thought maybe you might be interested in. So let's take a look. Our first one is called Integrating SAP into DevOps Pipelines. Why and how? This one is happening tomorrow, Wednesday, October 28th at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It's sponsored by Basis Technologies. Now, SAP is often thought of as a system of record, which traditionally has been thought of as a DevOps-free zone. But that's changing, and SAP's systems enable critical operational processes, and in an increasingly interconnected technology stack, they need to adapt at high speed if a business is going to stay truly agile. So this webinar takes a look at why DevOps teams should care about SAP, take a look at some of the key differences between that DevOps need to understand with SAP implementations, and how to get started with DevOps for SAP and successfully integrate SAP into wider DevOps pipelines. We'll also take a look at some real-world examples of SAP DevOps adoption. Good stuff. Okay. Second webinar I want to let you know about is called Best Practices for Driving Software Quality Through a Federated Application Security Responsibility Model. This one is also happening on Wednesday, October 28th at 1 p.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard, and it's sponsored by Zero North. In this webinar, we're going to take a look at some of the real-life challenges security teams are facing as they seek to implement a federated AppSec responsibility model, and we'll offer some of the practical advice to help address those challenges. And we've been talking about shared responsibility in security for a while, and this webinar really takes a deep dive on what organizations can do to kind of further their federated app security goals. Definitely one worth checking out. Again, that one is happening at 1 p.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard, Wednesday, October 28th. Speaking of security, our final webinar today is called Don't Let Security Trip You Up, DevOps and Security. This one is happening also Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com, and it's sponsored by Synopsys. You know, DevOps or DevSecOps is actually becoming more critical as more organizations are developing and pushing out more applications in this era of digital transformation. But for some organizations, implementing DevSecOps is easier said than done. So this webinar will provide, hopefully, some actionable insight into meeting DevSecOps challenges, as well as building security into the DevOps software delivery lifecycle, or software development lifecycle, integrating and scaling the right tools in the DevOps pipeline to enable DevSecOps, and coordinating with the various teams to ensure that the process is well-defined, tools are properly configured, and developers are ready to fix issues when the build breaks. All right, that's all that I have for today's edition of the Webinars Preview. Please check back on Thursday when I will have a fresh batch of webinars for you. But until then, have a great day. Stay safe.
All right, next up, it's the Analyst Corner with Mitchell Ashley, co-founder, CEO, Accelerated Strategies Group, with a little commentary and video for today. Over to you, Mitchell.
This is Digital Anarchist.
I'm happy to be joined by Devin Redmond, who's co-founder and CEO of Theta Lake. Devin, great to have you be talking with you today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Nice to meet you. I'm excited to hear about your company and some of the things that are happening, some announcements. But first, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about you and about the company, and we'll get into a little bit about why you started it and what you all do.
That's perfect. So as mentioned, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Theta Lake. I've been in the security and compliance space actually longer than I care to recount, but since the late 90s, I started my career at a company called Checkpoint Software in the firewall VPN space.
I might have heard of them, yeah.
Yeah, they've been around. They've been around for a while and were early pioneers in the market. My career kind of followed that trajectory of staying close to the knitting in security and compliance over the last handful of years, really more on the thesis that those two things intersect more and more. How you deal and exchange information, communicate information is increasingly integral to how you deal with security issues. And you can see that in cybersecurity regulations that are now about protecting data and dealing with disclosure of when you have a breach of sensitive data, all the way through to regulations that are designed to protect privacy, and then even all the way at the extreme of compliance, consumer protection regulations that you see that apply to financial services. But as that thesis progressed, my parallel thesis across Checkpoint, companies like Neoterras, I was an executive at WebSense, which is now known as ForcePoint, for many years, and I was there during the acquisition of the DLP product line. Was responsible for a lot of the product strategy and product management at WebSense during that time, and carried that forward. But a lot of my thesis follows the theory that as users communicate and as they exchange information, that place, those channels that they use to do that is usually where security and compliance needs to follow, right? That's where the risk enters as you start sharing those things. And whether it's accidental risk and accidental exposure and scenarios, or whether it's intentional compromise from insiders or external folks figuring out that's where the good stuff is. If you follow the migration of communications, you will usually find scenarios where there's a need for security and compliance to enable safe usage of those communication channels. And so really followed that thesis along, started my first company after leaving WebSense, which was a company called Nextgate, which played in the social media security and compliance space. That company had a very good run. It was very successful quickly. As we were going through the process of our Series B fundraising, one of the partners that we've been working with, Proofpoint, in the email security and compliance space, indicated that they'd be interested in acquiring us. And we ended up seeing that as a good opportunity for the team, the technology, our investors as well. And we took that acquisition offer, became part of Proofpoint. I was there for a few years as the GM for the digital risk and compliance business unit. And then actually really enjoyed being an entrepreneur so much that as much as I liked Proofpoint and thought they had a great team and really great technology, and it was a pleasure to work with the management team there, really wanted to build a business again. So I left, took some time off in early 2017, and at the end of 2017 came back to that thesis that keeps sticking in my head over and over again, which is as communication channels evolve and they change, and as people are sharing information on those new mediums, there needs to be reimagined and new technology to deal with the pain points there. And that's really what we did with Data Lake, was say that the trend really was becoming more and more modern collaboration tools where you have multimodal communications where you can use video, chat, you can share files on screen, in a file transfer, in a chat thread uploaded. You can use visual content to communicate things like emojis. There's a voice component. You can do all of those things together in one video session, or you could start with, say, a Microsoft Teams chat and then click on the app integration into Zoom and launch from that into a Zoom meeting, and then share your screen in the Zoom meeting and open up an HR app that's a cloud-based app and share that on screen, or open up Salesforce or HubSpot and share customer information in screen. And thinking through those use cases, it just became apparent to us that there was a new reality of how we were going to be sharing information and working, and there needed to be a new platform for that. And so
your timing couldn't have been better.
Yeah,
I'm curious too, and you're obviously proof point of the reason why we talk about the entrepreneurial bug, right? You do kind of get that in your system.
Yeah.
So you pivoted in the next company, in this company, Data Lake, really working on collaboration platforms. Is that primarily like video, the WebExes, the Zooms of the world, or do you venture into Slack and Team and other collaboration platforms?
Yeah, it's the full stack for us. So we've got over 34 unique integrations at this point, publicly available in the market. We started with video, and our premise really around that was, hey, if we can solve for Zoom and WebEx, where you have everything from things that can be shown on camera, a document shown on camera, to things shared in the screen and text used in-app whiteboarding features, all the way to the chat that happens around it, as well as the voice. If we can solve for all of the risks and being able to identify risks and capture all of that content effectively in that, everything else is, although there are always variations, is a upstream component of that. And so we started with video first. As we got into last year and we're building our integrations, rapidly moved into the broader chat side of that. We've also seen one of our big partners is Ring Central. And we do a lot with them on the voice side because they've got an integrated office suite where you can do calling, you can do chat, you can do video, you can do SMS. And so we got an opportunity to really work with them in scenarios where sometimes we're working with firms or organizations that are just using it as their office suite for calling. And so our ability to take a voice recording and identify risks within that automatically, provides a huge value for firms that are regulated or care about what's happening inside of those calls, making sure that the wrong things aren't being shared in that, or they're not over-promising and subject to regulatory requirements around supervision for guarantees they may have provided, those types of things.
Well, it's, kind of building off of your background, I think we're talking about compliance, data leakage, data exposure, security. It can be as simple as just a screenshot. Somebody taking a screen clip or, hitting the screen print button, that sound there.
Yeah.
And to take an image of, the 3-year financials that are up on the screen. There's some pretty sensitive information shared over video platforms alone.
Yeah, and you nailed it. And I think the reality that organizations hadn't really been acknowledging, because there wasn't a forcing function, they didn't have to. And there's plenty of security risks, data exposure risks that were front and center for everybody, is that not knowing felt like bliss, right? Like, I don't know what happened in that meeting, and therefore
that's
I don't have
been
to
a
do
problem
anything
for
about it.
us since security started. In
Exactly.
The late 90s, right?
Around recording their video meetings, recording that content, capturing that content, and they treat it. One of my favorites was a executive in a compliance group that we were talking to. He's like, but isn't it like an elevator conversation? Like, it's 2 people or 3 people or those people, and it happened in that point in time, but there's no record of it, so we're safe. And the reality is, just like you said, either one of us could be screenshotting all the way through. I could have turned on QuickTime and started recording this. I could turn on my phone and record it from my phone. Or if I was using my phone to communicate, I could just record the whole thing natively there. And so there is that scenario where it's actually the flip, right? The burden of proof is on proving it didn't happen. It's not on proving it happened, because any party in that meeting can grab any piece of that information, and whether it is to deal with the fact that maybe they feel like they were overpromised and they're going to sue in a financial services regulatory environment, or worst case, they want to publish it for the court of public opinion. That's bad. And then even beyond that kind of worst case scenario, it's somebody could get very sensitive information out of one of these meetings, right? But
it seems like we're kind of in the honeymoon period of everything is bliss. It's kind of like the early days of social media. Oh, what could go wrong if I share all this information about myself? And I don't know if it's happened yet, but we'll have the Wall Street Journal article episode or my ransomware from my Slack data, or whatever happen soon. It's inevitable. It's going to happen to us.
Yeah, for sure. And I think collaboration really saved the day for the pandemic, right? It showed the value of being able to make remote work, distributed teams, distributed communication and information sharing really possible at a global scale almost instantly. And there are massive benefits to that shouldn't go away. That genie's not going to get put back in the bottle, as they say. But the reality is, it was adopted so quickly, and so little concern was taken for the fact that everything else is locked down, email is monitored, the physical workplace is monitored. There are lots of controls on your network, on your own devices, on managed devices. Yet at the same time, as everybody's turned on WebEx and Zoom and all of those platforms, outside of the integrity of the platforms, which all of our partners invest in, take very seriously, the reality is, where users exchange information is where there's no visibility. And that's an information superhighway. And I think if you think about the reality that, a lot of the DLP space was based on originally the concern about what you could attach to an email, migrated to the world of CASBs, where you're looking at the flow of data going to cloud-based applications. But if you think about what we could do in this Zoom right now, I could share any file that I have access to, either on our company network, on my device, on my Mac in this scenario, or any cloud-based app that we use. I could open it up and share it with you. And whether I did that for a productive reason and we were working on something and I accidentally overshared a field or opened up the wrong app and you saw a bunch of sensitive information, either in Jira about our development environment and product plans, or in our HR app, all of those things are just wide open and not monitored in that environment. And that is the intersection right now where compliance meets data leakage prevention meets the reality of the new workplace living inside of the screen, and where people may share links to sites that get compromised or have been compromised and have a poor reputation. They do things between each other on camera that would be not allowed in the physical workplace and would be monitored by an HR team, but are happening in these environments. So just like you said, it's only a matter of time before the laughable moments and the gaffes we see in the articles now turn into really serious scenarios where it happened on a web meeting.
So short of paying a whole large group of people to watch every video meeting happening and every conversation over a collaboration tool, how do you solve this? What approach do you take with Data Lake? How do you begin to address this issue?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, as we mentioned, we do security and compliance for modern collaboration platforms. We spent the bulk of our 2019 really working on our integration partnerships. As we thought through the problem and kind of worked our way back from where we wanted to be, we felt like if we could be a frictionless integration as you deploy a cloud-based collaboration tool like Zoom or like WebEx or RingCentral, then the thing we needed to do was have those integration partnerships, make sure that if you go to the Zoom app marketplace or you go to the app source for Microsoft and you look for security and compliance for Teams or for Zoom, or you do the same at Cisco, we would be the name that pops up as a solution there. So ready-made, easy to integrate and turn on. And then once we're turned on and we consume content from that, we use our now patent granted and multi-patent pending AI technology that uses machine learning and natural language processing to take content out of one of our integration partners, whether it's a chat digest, a phone recording, a video recording. We run that through our classifiers, and what they're designed to do is detect risks in that automatically. So identify if PII was shared, identified if a web application or a cloud-based app like a CRM app was shared on screen, if there was a credit card or a URL that was shared in the chat in that meeting or in chat in general, or if somebody said something on the call where they were maybe making a promissory statement in a regulatory context. So we analyze all of that, tear all the content apart, look for those types of risks. And then one of the other big things that we really felt needed to happen in the market was then make that navigable for security and compliance reviewers. And so we take those detections and we surface that into a review workplace where you get the recording or the chat digest in its native format, scrollable, right? If it's a chat, you can go across the timeline. You see everything in the context of who was talking to who and what emojis were where and what comments were where. In a video, you could watch the entirety of the video, search the content. But we also mark on the timeline and then create a workspace on the right-hand side that walks a professional in compliance or security through all of those potential risks that happen inside of there. So instead of watching an hour-long Zoom video, we actually save all of that time by saying, sure, you could watch it if you want to, it's right here. But if you click to minute 133, this is where we identified a risk, and you can confirm that risk, add escalation steps in the workflow. If it's in chat, potentially remediate it if you want to remediate or remove it from that conversation. So somebody may have left a URL exposed in a channel that is a bad URL or a piece of content that you don't want out there. You could actually remove that directly from the system, but really streamlining that whole process of being able to manage that and find the proverbial needle inside of the stack of needles in that environment. And so instead of it being an unmanageable, unfathomable task, it becomes something that you deal with based on proactive risk identification. So the system flags and tells you when there is a conversation that you need to take a look at because there was a potential exposure in that conversation, or used fully as an archive. You can go in and search for particular things that you may realize after the fact. Hey, we want to check on this particular trend. We're going to go back. It wasn't necessarily a pure risk scenario for us that we wanted proactive notification on, but we do want to go back and monitor for these things at some point, quarterly, annually, et cetera, when we're doing a review.
Well, yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because I had sort of flashbacks maybe nightmares, the early days of intrusion prevention systems where everything's flagged, right? It's sort of the barking dog syndrome, and you stop paying attention to it. So I was curious of how much of is this an active, immediate response versus is this more of a discovery, investigative, diagnostic kind of tool for finding out, we had a breach, we had some information, data leakage. Where did it come from? Who might have done it? Is there more one scenario than another where you would use data lake?
Yeah, I'd say it's in many ways kind of the happy medium between those. Having lived through those days firsthand and the early days of DLP, I can very much relate. And I think one of the benefits of having done this for a while, one of the opportunities as an entrepreneur is you kind of get a chance to go back and take the hindsight and go, okay, let's not build something that's super noisy and unmanageable. It was great in the opening days because it's exciting, but then it quickly becomes something you just don't know what to do with because it's too noisy. And so one of the things that we really spent a lot of time doing is thinking about how we want to approach proactivity versus kind of pure discovery in that environment. And what we wanted to do on the proactivity is create the concept of there's about 75 built-in detections in the system across regulatory detection or regulatory compliance, things like PII, sensitive data, exposure through things like cloud-based apps, down into acceptable use, which can range from abusive behavior to things that are shown on screen, controversial images, and things that you may not want in your new workplace inside of Zoom or inside of WebEx, and be notified when it happens, all the way down to security detections, compromised links or risky links that are being shared or links to shadow IT that you might not want. So all of those detections are available. You can pick policy templates, how we nest those detections. So if you're a firm in the UK that is financial services oriented, you may only want data privacy and UK-based regulatory requirements detected or risk detected in that environment. So you can choose those. You can have N number of policies applied to different geographies, different regions, different channels even. Maybe you use one tool for one type of communication, another tool for another type. All of that is configurable, but one of the other things that we did in the system is have the concept of risk scoring around those detections, which is flexible. We come with pre-built dispositions around certain items, but you can change and tune those if you want. And so those become particularly useful because you can say, hey, I know we're going to see lots of emails in here, so I don't necessarily want to increase the risk score or the urgency of something with an email. I want to know when it happens and go back and be able to search and see all the scenarios where that played out. Or I want to know when a whiteboard appeared in the background, not necessarily risky that it happened, but I should know when it happened. And if that particular conversation was risky overall and there was a whiteboard, I definitely want to know that there was a whiteboard in that session. And so taking that concept of risk scoring allows us to create a workflow like the one I mentioned, where if a account number appears on screen or a bad URL appears in the chat, we can increase the risk score of that particular item and say, this one you need to look at because it's got an elevated risk score. But this one, maybe you don't need to look at because it's low risk. It does have some detections in it, but we'll triage that for you. And that makes that much more manageable in that environment and allows you to do more and more around either overall risk scoring and things that may be high risk, or particular detections that you really care about that are both risky and very pertinent to what your concerns align with as an organization or a company.
I can imagine some environments. The thing that comes to mind is, classified, top secret, military, government.
Yes.
Those kind of settings where there are very, very stringent requirements. And of course, corporations want to protect their information, their internal intellectual property, financials, things like that. Your pizza shop probably is not quite as concerned about the Zoom call that they had, using sort of the other extreme. But it seems like the larger institutions like that are going to be more interested, at least initially, in this capability. Is that true?
Yeah, and I think you can kind of follow the logical flow of how markets like this evolve, right? The organizations that have the most needs around this are large enterprise, highly regulated verticals like financial services, health, pharma, government and education. are likely ones. And as you get into those highly regulated, they can be large all the way down to small, because some of those requirements and compliance concerns are, run the gamut of size in those particular verticals. But over time, as this really becomes the more primary workplace, you'll see all of those scenarios, like we talked about, the laughable moments that turn into lawsuits later, start to affect how people leverage this technology. I remember back in the days when WebSense was a reseller of Checkpoint and was used to provide filtering to make sure that people didn't go to naughty sites or spend too much time watching sports at work on the web in the early days of the internet, right? So the migration of communication and information sharing happening in real time. And at first it was large organizations that were really worried about those scenarios and time savings and eventually potential infections. But eventually that became something that everybody expects, whether it's their Wi-Fi router or whatever endpoint security they're using or whatever they have on their network to protect their small business all the way up to their large enterprise from dealing with. And I think that will be more the case as the workplace that we're in includes not just the physical workplace, but this workplace inside of the screen that we're in right now. Will be more and more. But you're certainly right. The bulk of the early days are people who have rolled out, hundreds, thousands of users on collaboration tools with sometimes training, but often very little training and preparation for this new environment they're in, with access to all of the information they've always had, and now just a free flow of, here you go, here's the collaboration tool. Maybe there's some settings that they've tuned around, what features can and can't be on, but for the most part, users are just having at it right now, and that scenario is pretty frightening for most orgs.
That's why I always remind people, in Slack or in Twitter, it's called a direct message, not a private message.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
It's still there. It's still discoverable. Admins somewhere could potentially view that or pull that from a data archive. So remember, you're talking on still a public medium, even if it's between just two people.
Yeah. And it's funny. I'll go back to something you said earlier, because it was a use case we just saw at one of our clients, which is really interesting. They're very worried about sensitive non-public information being shared in these meetings. And we noted in the detection, so we can see it on screen if somebody, shares a screen and they've got a document that has, non-public, confidential, NDA only, any of those descriptors, we will detect that and let you know that we found something that was marked as sensitive being shared. But what we found as we were doing testing and looking through the corpus with them on some of the anonymized data is we found that in many of those scenarios, the documents were actually not properly marked, but in the audio component, and this is where you get into that mesh communication mode, somebody would identify and say, hey, I shouldn't be showing this to you, or hey, this is confidential, and they would expose it. And if you were just looking for sensitivity labels or a particular type of document, you might miss it. And so it was one of those things where it was a really good application of kind of that meshed detection model where you think about, oh yeah, there's all these pieces of context that happen in this. And if you look at all of them and you can detect all of them, then you'll really find when something interesting or potentially risky has happened that you need to act upon in that environment. And I think that's one of the really interesting challenges that comes up in this space is if you're just looking at a transcript, you might not never know what happened in there. If you're just looking at the visual component, you might not know what happened. You have to look at the audio, the chat, the visual component, anything that was shared on screen, anything that was spoken, anything that was typed. All of those are the vectors that you have to put together and go, okay, well, what happened here?
Well, context is everything too, right? If it's a discussion with your legal department or whatever versus, I'm telling my friend about what's happening at work. So you had some exciting news here recently, or just announced actually, about a funding event for your company. Tell us about it.
So it's a momentous occasion for us and kind of the growth of a startup, and you really relish these phases. So We just announced our Series A investment, a little over $12.7 million invested in the company. Really excited by the investors. So Lightspeed Venture Partners led the round. Cisco Ventures participated. So we've been working with Cisco as an integration partner. They're very positive on kind of the demand they see from Cisco WebEx users. And so with that, the collaboration group really drove the investment in us and been very supportive, as were all of our partners in that environment. But that fresh round of funding comes at a kind of a perfect time for us. We couldn't have anticipated the pandemic and the tailwinds it would create around the usage of collaboration, and then downstream from that around the demand for dealing with security and compliance. And so the good news is that does create a lot of tailwind. The challenging news, and the reason why we were so excited to go out and do the fundraise, is it really gives us the capacity both to continue to push the edge on our technology platform and the innovation and the AI, but also really build out the key parts of the business that allow us to kind of keep pace with making our customers happy, really providing them not just good technology, but good service around the technology, making them effective with that. Again, opportunity to kind of right all those challenges, having known what they will go through as they adopt new detection mechanisms on new communication channels. There are a lot of things that you can put in place that aren't technology related around how you help them navigate a POC through pilot to deployment that really can make them effective and not burdened by doing all these new things. And so that investment really gives us the opportunity to continue to innovate on the technology, but really build out our ability to deliver that platform to the market.
Typically, Series A, Series B is invested in product capabilities, building out the sales team, geographic expansion of offices or where you're selling. Are those the planned uses for you or other areas?
Yeah, no, pretty straightforward. I think our continued investment in the engineering group, in data science, in the backend engineering. And then I think one of our hallmarks has also been usability. In fact, a couple of our patents pending are around our design on review workflow and some of those things. And so we will continue to invest heavily in that and drive that forward. And then really building out sales, the ability to reach customers, and building out what I call our field technical services, which includes everything from pre-sales engineering to post-sales engineering and customer success, are really heavily earmarked. And then kind of in lockstep with that is our ability to be present in multiple geos in terms of having team and staff and do that expansion. Today we have, fortunately, and we've grown very quickly, we've got customers in North America, both in the US and Canada, in the UK, also in Australia and the ANZ region. And so we've seen pretty great adoption. We've created delivery of our cloud platform in each of those geos, so we don't have things like data going across borders, so we're able to service those customers uniquely in each of those environments. We'll continue to invest in that and in that type of geographic expansion, but we'll also put teams behind that now as well. So there'll be folks in time zone that can work with those customers more directly.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. So folks can find out about the product, because you have product in market at thetalake.com, and hope that they will check you out. Good luck with this round and using that to help grow the company. And interesting space, interesting time to be in it. And it sounds like your timing was, whether planned or unplanned, turned out to be
yeah, exactly. When your number's called, you have to be ready, and thankfully we were ready. So really appreciate the opportunity and really excited to see what we can do in the market, and hope everybody gets a chance to check us out.
Great. Wish you the best. This has been great talking with Devin Redmond, who's CEO, co-founder of Data Lake.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Thanks, Mitchell. All right, now it's time for a double dose of Channel Roundup with Mike Vizard. Mike's guests this week include Dan Larson, Vice President of Marketing at Arctic Wolf, and of course they just announced a huge round and unicorn valuations, and we'll find out why. Why the level of confidence, and congratulations to them. And then Mike also has an interview with CEO Richard Lee of Ambassador Labs on API gateways. So now over to Mike for two great interviews.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the toss. We're here with Dan Larson, VP of Marketing for Arctic Wolf. They just raised another $200 million in funding to bring them up to a $1.3 billion valuation. They focus a lot on this whole managed security space and managed detection and response. Dan, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you very much for having me.
All right. One of the things you guys mentioned in the press release is that there are some other areas that you're going to invest in or you're thinking about from a technology perspective. And I'm not sure what you can disclose, but you tickled our interest. And what's left to be done?
Yeah, well, a lot of the investment is going to go into building out new data centers and new regions. A big part of our plans going forward is to expand globally, and we'll be using a lot of the funds from the Series E to drive that. In terms of technology and product areas, what's really important to us is that the security operations market is where we want to invest and play. And today we're doing managed detection and response, managed risk, and also managed cloud monitoring. But that's just a small slice of what you would expect of an overall security operations center. So in terms of products and capabilities, we're just going to stay on that path, investing in more of the things that'll allow us to deliver security operations as a concierge service to our customers.
Do you think security as a whole is moving to become more of a service because it's just gotten so complex? And are IT people willing to do that? I mean, I've talked to some of them and they're like, well, security is too important to outsource, but we admit that we're not very good at it.
Yeah, I think really the state of the art now is blending a technology product with services components. So for example, you've seen across the security industry, product vendors adding services to help. So they'll have things like a threat hunting service or a alert triage service. There's certain parts of the security process that can be accelerated and augmented when you have access to expertise. And I think that's why you're starting to see this trend in the market. And of course, there's a more general problem, which is there just aren't enough cybersecurity experts out there. Everybody's having a hard time, recruiting, hiring, and retaining talent. So it's incumbent upon us vendors in the space to offer both a technology product as well as a service to support it.
Am I completely outsourcing security to you guys, or is it more like a co-manage approach where you're taking care of a lot of the infrastructure, but I still participate on my side?
Yeah, so we want to do both. We think security operations is kind of what the industry needs to solve the challenges of the effectiveness problem in cybersecurity. And if you're a smaller business who only has an IT team and you don't even have a security team, we want to be a solution to meet your needs. If you're a large enterprise who has a SOC, but maybe it's only 8x5, you don't have 24/7 coverage, so you just need a little help, we can do that too. And we think if we're going to bring security operations to everybody, we have to have a solution, down market, mid market, and for the large enterprise.
It seems to me that automation of security would be a no-brainer, and yet we don't see a lot of it out there. So what's the challenge or what's the hurdle?
Well, what I've learned in my time in cybersecurity is that you automate as much as you can. But the reality is that for a lot of the attacks, especially the more sophisticated ones, there's a human on the other end of the keyboard. And sometimes you just need, human intelligence, human intuition to counteract that. So I think the smart play in security is to automate that which can be automated, but realize that'll never be 100%. So you got to have a solution for that last 1%. And right now, the best we can do, even with the help of, new technologies like, AI and behavioral analytics, we're still finding that if you actually want to stop the threats, there's got to be a human somewhere in the mix.
Well, since you brought up AI, what is your take on what's happening with AI these days in security? A lot of people are skeptical that you can ever make any use of AI. Is this something you guys are looking at, or what do you think is going to happen?
It's integral, right? It is the cutting edge, state of the art, especially for some of the old tasks that we're familiar with. Like, it's definitely a good thing to do to replace like signature-based antivirus with machine learning models, right? There's some kind of obvious places like that, and I think the criticisms that you hear are for some of the more cutting edge stuff that just isn't fully developed yet. So it's here, it's useful, it's not going away. And we as a company are going to keep investing in it because it's a key component for driving automation in the process.
You think the bad guys are investing in AI?
Yeah, absolutely. There's evidence of that, right? You can try and poison the models. You can use AI to reverse engineer the other AI. So yeah, it's an arms race, but that's always been the case in cybersecurity.
There's a lot of talk these days about DevSecOps, and of course, anything to do with DevOps is closely aligned with automation. Do you think that as more the DevOps teams get involved in security, that they'll be more inclined to embrace automation, and that the two ultimately result in this thing people are calling DevSecOps?
Yeah, absolutely. That has to be the case, right? Cybersecurity has a bad reputation for being an inhibitor to the business, and we have to get better and better at being not just a partner, but an enabler of the business. And if somebody wants to have a CI/CD pipeline where they're dynamically spinning up and spinning down infrastructure all the time, you can't just not have security there, right? It's the job of the security vendors to innovate and to deliver the solutions that work with the business so that those new processes can be secured.
One of the things I also hear a lot about is there's just a phenomenal amount of fatigue in the cybersecurity squad. There's alerts all day long. You get hundreds of these things. Most of the time you're doing a wild goose chase. And of course, the one that gets through is the one that kind of destroys everything. And, it's hard to win this battle. What's your sense of how can we maybe create more signal from all the noise?
Yeah, this is one of the real challenges we hear from our customer base. And if you just go around and look at the research in cybersecurity, the average organization is getting more than 10,000 alerts per day. So there's a whole lot of products out there, claiming that they can do a good job of separating the signal from the noise, but the ground truth is that that's just not the case. And to the point we were talking about earlier, where can humans and where do services fit in the mix? This is one of the places where you're seeing it. Some companies will just have an alert triage service. What we do at Arctic Wolf is have one of our concierge security engineers who actually knows your environment and knows what's normal and not normal for you. They validate every single ticket that we send to the customer to make sure it's real. And the result of that is that our customers only get a couple alerts per week. So, for the people out there trying to do it themselves with a SIM or with a bunch of tools, and they're overwhelmed with these 10,000 alerts a day, it doesn't have to be that way, right? Vendors like us can help. We can help prioritize, we can help triage, we can give you context, and we can make sure that you're not wasting your time and burning out your team because you can't properly prioritize alerts.
How has the whole COVID environment shifted the way people are approaching cybersecurity? Because not just the employees are working from home, but many of the cybersecurity professionals are working from home. So in your experience so far, what have you seen? What are the fundamental or tangible changes?
Yep. Yeah, so we just released our first ever annual security operations report. And one of the things we saw in there is the number of systems connecting to unsecured Wi-Fi has more than doubled. It's up 250%. And it makes sense, right? People are at home, they're working from their friend's house, from a coffee shop, or from a shared working location. So I think we can safely draw the conclusion that a remote worker is more of a security risk than a on-premise but in the corporate network worker. So we've seen that trend, right? More exposure, more attacks. We've also seen the attacks specifically trying to exploit the COVID situation. with spear phishing and that sort of thing, trying to, exploit things like possible vaccines, things like that. So we've seen all of that. But more importantly, from the business side of things, belts were already pretty tight before the pandemic. And now every IT leader was asked to move faster. And for a lot of industries, because of the economic impact, they have to do more belt tightening. So they're looking for solutions that can get deployed quickly, actually have the efficacy they're looking for, and deliver value. And a big part of the world we live in is, we believe that in order to really be protected, you need 24/7 continuous monitoring. And the cost of doing that in-house is massively higher than working with a vendor like us to get the same level of coverage. So we're seeing that economic driver actually bring more business our way.
Speaking of cost, one of the things that comes up a lot is that people are concerned that the percentage of dollars being allocated to security as a percentage of the total budget keeps going up year after year. And everybody appreciates the need for increased security, but do you think that we may see a point where that may top off, or where people are going to say, yeah, we have to automate this because the costs are out of control? And what are you hearing as the pushback from people?
Well, one of our founding beliefs as a company is that the cybersecurity industry, the strategy, the way most people have tried to solve the problem has been a tool-centric problem, right? When viruses came out, we made a tool, antivirus. When exploitation became more common, we had anti-exploit. And then we had whitelisting. And then we had firewalls, next gen this, next gen that. People have ended up with a bunch of tools that don't actually deliver the cybersecurity outcome. So unless we go back and kind of reassess that attitude and say, wait a second, the solution to the problem, the way to get more efficacy isn't to buy yet another tool. The way to get better security outcomes is to step back and think of it as an operational problem. You probably already have the perimeter defense you need. You probably already have the endpoint protection you need. You just have to squeeze more value out of it. So how do you do that? And our take is that you should stop distracting yourself with yet another tool. Focus instead on making sure the stuff you have is working properly, is feeding into a common data source that's being monitored 24/7 by experts. And if you take that operational approach, you can get better outcomes without spending more money.
Do you think that the network perimeter has indeed dissolved, or has it just kind of been extended out a little bit, but we still have these multiple layers of things that need to be defended?
I mean, there's still a perimeter. That's undeniable. But the story is more complicated than that, right? I mean, businesses still have networks, they still have firewalls, they still have perimeter security. That's true. But that's not the end of the story anymore. Now you've got remote workers, you've got cloud infrastructure, you've got hybrid data centers, you've got mobile devices, and that's all in play. So yes, people still have perimeters and they still have to secure them, but there's way more to the story.
All right. So people have a perception that cybersecurity people are, they got hoodies, they work in basements in places like Silicon Valley. So here you guys are moving to Eden Prairie, Minnesota. What's in Minnesota?
A highly skilled talent pool and a great place to live and work. We started making investments in Minnesota back in 2016, and the team that has grown there is largely sales and marketing, and they've been driving the growth of the business. And our decision to move the headquarters there is a decision to double down on the success we've seen from that team. We were able to, achieve unicorn status, get to this $1 billion valuation with a big investment in Minnesota. So now we're doubling down on it.
Do you get concerned at all that a lot of people get skeptical of valuations and unicorns and all this stuff that's going on out there? Has that become something of a distraction, or does it mean that, you have staying power? Or, what should people take that to mean if they're not working on Wall Street?
I mean, really, it's a form of validation, right? There's a lot of new companies out there. There's a lot of growing companies. It's easy to get an early round of funding. There's a lot that make it to that point, but the number of cybersecurity unicorns you see in a given year is pretty small. And it means that we're a company that's growing, has good customer base, and that if you're in the market for the type of solutions we offer, we're a stable player. We'll be here tomorrow, and we're going to continue to grow.
All right, Dan, last question. Other than coming to hang out on your website, which I'm sure you're proud of like every other marketer, but what's your best advice to people right now? What should they be thinking through or maybe evaluating as we head into 2021?
The big thing for us is just rethinking how we approach cybersecurity. Are you going to add another tool to your tech stack? Are you going to increase complexity? Or are you going to take a look at what you already have and think about how you can get more value from it? And if it's not a part of your plan to have 24/7 monitoring with threat detection and response and on-demand access to security experts when you need it, then you should rethink your plan.
Hey, Dan, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks. Nice to meet you.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and TechStrong TV.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw from the studio. We're here with Richard Lee, CEO of Ambassador Labs, one time known as DataWire. They are fresh off of raising another $18 million in funding around a API gateway for Kubernetes environments that's available open source. Richard, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. Great to be here.
So what's the plan for the 18 million? What do you guys need to do now? And where are we with API gateways in the land of Kubernetes?
Well, Mike, one of the things that we've seen in the Kubernetes space is that API gateways are increasingly being used by developers. And developers have a very different set of requirements and needs for API gateways beyond just your traditional managing traffic. And so we've actually had a lot of success with another product called Telepresence, which lets you virtualize services to improve your testing velocity. And we're really integrating Telepresence with Ambassador, along with a few other products, to create a full API lifecycle management solution for developers on Kubernetes.
Well, walk me through how Telepresence works with the API gateway. I think people understand the core concept of an API gateway, but I'm not sure they get Telepresence. So give us a little more detail.
Yeah, so one of the challenges that as you start developing on Kubernetes is you start ending up with lots of microservices with lots of APIs. And those APIs, they take up a lot of resources in terms of CPU and memory, and you can't all run them locally. And so what happens is that developers then start developing these in the cloud. And the problem is when they're in the cloud, you can't use your favorite tools. It's somewhere else. And so what Telepresence lets you do is it lets you run one microservice locally using your favorite tools, and it connects that microservice to everything else in the cloud. So you really run in this best of both worlds model where the one service you're coding is locally, everything else is in your remote Kubernetes cluster. And so you get fast local development with your favorite tools while you get unlimited compute and network and memory of the cloud. And so by combining this with an API gateway, you can actually do development of an API, testing of an API, and actually running and deploying an API. So you really get that full API lifecycle.
So it kind of turns the whole process into a miniature hybrid cloud in its own right.
Exactly. Yeah, we like to think of it as really it's extending the cloud all the way to your laptop.
All right, cool. Where are we in terms of Kubernetes adoption these days, level of sophistication? I think, last time I checked, everybody had one, maybe two. It's not clear to me that they are deploying at scale yet, but maybe they are. And are you starting to see a lot more applications being developed? And if so, why?
Well, so Mike, one of my favorite stories is one of my favorite customers actually is a state prison system actually runs Ambassador and Kubernetes. They're a commercial customer of ours. And the reason why I bring them up is you would never think a prison system of a state would really be state-of-the-art cloud technologies, and they're really not state-of-the-art. It's just that Kubernetes adoption has gotten so big that the state prison system is actually adopting Kubernetes. We also have gaming companies. We have a bunch of gaming companies that actually deploy Kubernetes and Ambassador at scale, running millions of requests per second. So that's the other end of the spectrum. And so we really see Kubernetes adoption exploding everywhere, from state prison systems and government to tech companies and gaming companies to Fortune 500 companies.
I seem to remember a few years back, there was a wave of mergers and acquisitions around API gateways, and everybody kind of thought maybe this was a problem that had been solved. So what changed in the land of Kubernetes, and why are there so many new players trying to compete with older players in this whole category?
So we see Kubernetes as not just a platform shift. I know a lot of companies look at Kubernetes as the shift in application architecture, and it certainly is. We actually see Kubernetes also as a shift in workflow. And there's this mentality of you build it, you run it. And so when you actually are building it, you're a developer, and you're being asked to actually run it, that really means that as a developer, you also need to manage that API gateway. So we see the emergence of this new way of working with infrastructure where developers are actually the end user. And so traditional API gateways aren't really designed for that world. And that's where Ambassador has really emerged, where most of our end users are actually developers. They're not operation teams.
Are we getting better with APIs? I think early on, and I still think we run into this, people were complaining that the APIs were brittle, they would break a lot, they may or may not be secure. Have we come a long way? What's the level of sophistication now?
I think it still varies. I think we still have a ways to go. I think what has happened, though, is that the best practices for APIs are much better understood than they were even a few years ago. And so now the challenge is, how do you actually adopt and implement those best practices in organizations? And that's part of the reason why we took the funding now, is really because we see a clear path around best practices. There's clear consensus, and now it's just a question of how do we share that knowledge with the rest of the world.
Are we then kind of treating APIs as their own standalone product? Are we kind of managing them as a full boat artifact, or do people still kind of think about them a little bit after the fact, and then maybe that's one of the reasons we don't see great APIs all the time?
Great question. We're seeing more and more of a shift to treating APIs as a product really managed by much smaller independent teams. So instead of having this one big API for your entire application, we see lots of independent teams who are independently managing APIs and really treating them as products, because those are the interfaces that other teams actually have to interact with their particular service and functionality.
Do you think the transition to Kubernetes and microservices is going to force more organizations down the path towards DevOps? I think it's almost impossible in my mind to kind of deal with this level of complexity. And yet we've been talking about DevOps for a long time now. So are we at some watershed moment?
I think that with Kubernetes, you have to adopt a DevOps mindset and mentality in order to really take advantage of it. We do see companies that don't fully embrace DevOps. And what happens then is that they go to Kubernetes thinking that they're going to accelerate their development, increase their agility, and suddenly things dramatically slow down. And so the companies that truly get the benefit from Kubernetes have really embraced DevOps. And we're seeing more and more organizations recognize that fact and start having a lot of conversations as they adopt Kubernetes. How do we truly embrace DevOps, which is a big cultural shift, as well as changes in technical best practices.
All right, so if you're looking at Kubernetes and you're kind of not fully embraced DevOps yet, what's your best advice to companies about how to go to get there, I guess? And what is the path or the route, or, do we just do it, or is there a plan?
I think my best advice is just do it, but start small, right? So the companies that we have seen been successful, say, identify a specific small scale project that is staffed with 3 or 4 engineers, and those 3 or 4 engineers are empowered to just do it. And those 3 or 4 engineers learn a lot, and they take those best practices and lead by example to the rest of the organization. And so that's the only way you really can achieve success. If you try to do a digital transformation from the top down all at once, there's a lot of skepticism. And you really need to really let that 3 or 4 engineers who lead the way to really show the rest of the world how to be successful.
A lot of folks, of course, will be talking about DevSecOps as kind of the next wave of DevOps. So how do you see that playing out around API gateways? Because it seems like I'm hearing a lot more about attacks that are aimed specifically at the API. So how do we secure the environment?
Big fan of DevSecOps. I think essentially it's all part of a trend where instead of having dedicated teams responsible for just security and throwing it over the fence, or a dedicated team responsible for operations, you're asking the developer to really assume full responsibility for that entire security, operations, and development. And now you might ask, well, is this possible? And it's possible if there's a shift in mindset and mentality where the security team's job is to actually train those developers and provide the tools the developers need in order to be effective. And that's what you see with the best DevSecOps tools and organizations, is that the security teams are really not just saying, developers, you have to do this. We're really going to help you do this. And that's the difference.
Last question. Do you think everything is going to go to Kubernetes? Will everything become a microservice, or will there still be this role for monolithic apps? And how do I attach maybe an API to a monolithic app?
I think the majority of sophisticated cloud native applications over time will be deployed on Kubernetes. There will always be a role for monolithic applications. Sometimes you just don't need that much horsepower. And if you're just deploying a simple blog, there's no real reason to actually adopt Kubernetes and microservices. So, but as more and more organizations shift more and more of their business online to the cloud, I absolutely think that Kubernetes will be that platform that they deploy on.
All right, great. Hey, Richard, thanks for being on the show.
Mike, pleasure to be here.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
Hey, Mike, thanks very much. Good stuff there. With all of these videos Mike's doing, we got to get him some better equipment. We'll see what we got in the budget here to get Mike an upgrade on his camera. Anyway, that's going to call a wrap on today's show. We hope you enjoyed TechStrong TV today, Tuesday, October 27th. We'll be back with fresh content on Thursday, the 29th. Look forward to having you join us then. But until then, this is Alan Schimmel wishing you that you stay safe, stay well, and stay strong. Tech strong. Bye-bye, everyone.